Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
I never thought betrayal could feel so silent. It wasn't the shouting, the accusations. It was the whispering lies that she crafted behind my back. Every "I love you" felt like a dagger, every kiss, a distraction from her guilt. I caught her, red-handed, in the arms of another man. My world shattered in a single moment, watching the woman I vowed to protect destroy everything we built. Now, I'm left here, in this endless storm of deceit, wondering, how long had she been laughing at me behind my back? The path was mostly dry, and the big puddle, usually at the bottom of the hill, was not as muddy as it often was. Sunlight filtered through the trees, brightening parts of the trail. On a different day, I would have enjoyed the warm, early spring weather and the fun of running in such nice conditions. But today, I had a lot on my mind. First was my worry about the girls. My thoughts about my wife were lower on the list for now. I chose to put that aside for the moment. I was also feeling the weight of my business. It wasn't just my own job at risk. A small group of people depended on hardwood products for their income. I had always believed that hard work, thoughtful planning, and making good choices would lead to success. Maybe I had done the first two well, but I must have erred in the last one. This made me think about Mel, my wife. I needed to think deeply about this. I did so as I ran, and it was about half a mile later when I realized that I might not know her as well as I believed. Or perhaps I only saw what she wanted me to see. My thoughts took me back many years to St. Thomas, where I first noticed her. Who could have guessed how our lives would turn out? As a freshman, I was small. My mom was of average height, and I didn't remember my dad since he passed away when I was 3. The few photos we had showed him as average size, too. In gym class, I felt small and out of place among my classmates, who were starting to grow and change. High school was a tricky time socially. The rules had changed. What was important in elementary school didn't matter anymore. Being popular, good at sports, looking good, and having friendships became what counted. I figured this out quickly during the fall of my freshman year. I hadn't grown like many of my classmates yet, and I didn't dress like them either. My clothes came from discount stores, and even those were a stretch for our budget. I couldn't complain to my mom about it. St. Thomas was a private school, and I had earned a scholarship that my mom found through our parish church. Many other students were not Catholic. Their parents sent them to this school for the good education and the reputation that came with private schools. At first, I felt like an outsider. I felt small and out of place with my finances, and my clothing choices didn't help me fit in. Only a small group of other misfits seemed to notice me, but I intentionally kept my distance from that group. I did try out for sports, and in the fall that meant football. I was often not noticed by the other kids and the coaches because I was smaller than them. But I worked hard. I was pretty quick, I was clever, and I never gave up. After some time, the coaches began to see how much I could contribute. In my first year, I didn't start playing, but I got some time on the court and did well. Winter was basketball season. One of the assistant football coaches also coached wrestling. He suggested I try out for wrestling since I was a good fit, strong, athletic, and determined. However, I chose to focus on basketball. I loved the game, but being shorter made it harder for me to stand out. Still, I wanted to make the team because of my defensive skills. In basketball, defense is all about effort, and that was something I could give. During tryouts, I focused on making it tough for the taller players as they brought the ball up, often forcing them to make mistakes. I was persistent, and the coaches sometimes said I should take it easier, thinking I was being too intense. On the last day of tryouts, one of the bigger kids tried to push me back because of his size. I held my ground, and despite his best efforts, I managed to take the ball from him and pass it to a teammate. I noticed the head coach watching me with a slight smile. When our eyes met, I felt encouraged by his recognition. I made the team, again not a starter, but whenever the team needed extra energy for defense, I was called in. Throughout my first year, my popularity changed. I still sat around the edge of the popular group, separate from the outcasts. My skills helped me fit in better, but my family's financial situation kept me humble. In the middle of the social scene was Melinda Manning. To me, she seemed like the perfect high school girl, almost like a star. She dressed well and walked with confidence. Her parents drove her to school in a nice car, and she had a close group of stylish friends with her around campus. It was clear that Melinda was very popular. The freshman boys had their own group, but they weren't quite at her level. She dated older boys. As I said, I was at the edge of that group, but I was just glad to be near the popular crowd at school. To keep my scholarship, I had to keep my GPA above 3.25. I knew this was important to my mom, so I worked hard in my classes. Throughout high school, I usually kept my GPA close to 4.0. I learned early that hard work and focus could help me succeed. By the time I was a senior, I finally had my growth spurt, reaching 6 feet and a quarter inch tall and weighing a solid 168 pounds. I played safety on the football team and started. While I wasn't starting in basketball yet, I was one of the first players to be called from the bench. Our football team was okay, but our basketball team faced more difficulties. Other private schools often brought in good players from cities on sports scholarships, while St. Thomas mostly offered academic and need-based scholarships. Since I was well known in my friend group, I had chances to be near Melinda. Sometimes I found myself looking her way, and she caught me a couple of times. She was very charming, and by her senior year she had become even more graceful. Every fall, St. Thomas hosted a Sadie Hawkins dance, where girls asked boys to go with them. This tradition might come across as old-fashioned now, but it was always fun. I had gone to the dance the year before after being asked and had a wonderful time. As the dance got closer, I heard that Melinda had invited a student from Morningside, a public school with a strong sports reputation. The student was John Pierre Terry, a well-known athlete. I had heard of him and knew he was good, especially at basketball. Even without him, Morningside had beaten us in football. As the dance approached, I hadn't planned to go. Then, on the Thursday before the event, I was invited by Taylor Pilkington. I was happy to accept her invite. Taylor was popular and part of Melinda's group, so I was thrilled to be her date, even if it was a last-minute plan. I started dreaming about what a relationship with Taylor could be like. I imagined us enjoying our senior year and possibly going to the same college. Those thoughts made me think of happy times ahead for us. But by Friday, I learned more about my date with Taylor, and my hopes quickly faded. Taylor had originally asked a guy named Eric, who was friends with John Pierre, Melanie's new boyfriend. Less than a week before the dance, he canceled, saying he would be out of town. With few options, Taylor turned to me. As my dreams fell apart, I felt disappointed, but thought maybe I could impress her at the dance, which lifted my spirits a little. The dance was fun, but it became clear early on that there would not be any romance between Taylor and me. When we arrived at the dance, Taylor said to me, "Thanks, Kevin, for bringing me. You're a good friend." She gave me a quick hug before going off to find her friends. If I had any doubts about how she felt, they were gone now. I was just a friend, someone she turned to at the last minute. Later, I went over to sit with Taylor and her friends. To her credit, she moved a little to make space for me. Taylor was a nice person. She was just showing that we were friends. At the table were Melanie and her date, John Pierre. Melanie looked wonderful. Her hair framed her pretty face perfectly. She wore a stylish black top that showed off her features, and her bright eyes were focused on John Pierre. John Pierre was tall, probably around 6 to 4 inches or 6'5". I could imagine him being good at basketball, just like I had heard. He had a strong build and a friendly smile. I had to admit he was quite good-looking. They looked like a perfect couple. As the night went on, I danced with Taylor a few times, and even with some other girls. When I took a break, I noticed a bit of chaos on the dance floor. I looked over and saw Taylor looking upset. I walked toward her and saw a bigger guy talking loud and holding Taylor's arm. The guy she had been dancing with earlier seemed to step back from what was happening. The larger guy was talking to a clearly unhappy Taylor. "Eric," Taylor said firmly, "let go of me. I'm not dancing with you." "Come on," he replied, his words a bit unclear. "I'm supposed to be your date." I looked closer at the guy. He wasn't as tall as John Pierre, but he was definitely larger, possibly over 200 pounds. He had an annoying grin on his face. It became clear that he was Taylor's original date. I figured she wanted nothing to do with him now. "Take it easy, man," I said as I stepped closer to the situation. The big guy, Eric, ignored me and kept talking to Taylor while still holding her arm. "Hey," I said louder, "let her go." I then grabbed his hand and pulled it away from her. Eric finally noticed me and turned his angry gaze in my direction. "Who are you?" he asked. He tried to push me away, but I was ready for it. As he moved, I turned slightly to the side to avoid him. With no balance, Eric stumbled forward and fell onto one knee in the middle of the dance floor. Some people started to laugh, and this made him even madder. The mix of anger, embarrassment, and his state made his face turn red. He was about to confront me again when Jean-Pierre stepped in. From behind, Jean-Pierre wrapped his arms around Eric, holding him still, and spoke softly to him. "Take it easy, man. It's all okay. We're good here." He guided Eric away from the dance floor and out of the room, and just like that, the little trouble was over. Taylor thanked me and seemed to appreciate my support. At one point, she even gave me a friendly kiss on the cheek. I hoped this could mean something more, but it was clear from many signs that she wanted us to stay just friends. Later on, I would see how good a friend Taylor really was. The next time I saw Jean-Pierre was during basketball season. Our St. Thomas basketball team was okay. Our star player was a kid named Aaron Blankenship. He played forward. In basketball, being tall can help, but we didn't have much height. Aaron was 6'3" and pretty fit. Our center, the same kid who had accidentally hurt me during tryouts, was about 6'5". He was big, but not very fast. After him, it was me and a couple of other guys around 6. That was it for height on our team. Morningside came to St. Thomas at the top of the league with 6 wins and 1 loss. We were at 3 wins and 3 losses. Jean-Pierre Terry, who was dating Melanie, was the top scorer in the league, and colleges were looking at him. By the late first quarter, we were already behind. Aaron was guarding Jean-Pierre, but picked up 2 quick fouls. By the end of the half, we were down by 12 points. Aaron had 3 fouls, and Jean-Pierre had already scored 16 points. Shortly after halftime, Aaron got his 4th foul. I saw the coach looking worried, trying to decide who to put in. Suddenly, he looked at me and nodded. For a moment, I was unsure if he meant me. "Gerard," he called, "get ready to come in." I heard the announcer say, "Kevin Gerard now in for Aaron Blankenship." I felt a rush of excitement as I prepared to enter the game and guard Jean-Pierre. I rushed onto the court and stayed close to Jean-Pierre. "Hey, I think I know you," Jean-Pierre said casually. He seemed relaxed, chatting with me while I felt excited but a bit nervous and didn't respond. On Morningside's first turn, their point guard passed the ball to Jean-Pierre. My heart raced as Jean-Pierre made a move to drive. I backed off just a bit. He then stepped back and made the shot easily. As we headed back to our side, he continued to talk. "You should really try to stay closer to me, or I'll keep doing that," he joked, looking calm and smiling a little. On the next play, I moved closer to him. He faked a shot and zipped past me. I was called for a foul. As Jean-Pierre walked to the free throw line, he gave my head a light tap and laughed, as if I needed more experience. In that moment, I spotted Melanie, Taylor, and their friends cheering for Jean-Pierre from the visitors' side. I could hear Melanie laugh as she saw what Jean-Pierre had done. Suddenly, my nerves faded away, replaced by determination. I focused on my defense, remembering a tip I had received. Play defense with your feet, not your hands. I focused on keeping my cool and figured out how to read his moves. On my next trip down the court, I stayed close to Jean-Pierre. I was right beside him, even when he didn't have the ball. His teammates wanted to pass to him, but I made it tough for them. At one point, Jean-Pierre tried to push me back, but I held my ground. He was bigger, but I was strong and didn't let him take the spot he wanted. Another player from Morningside took a shot, but it missed, and we grabbed the rebound. As the game went on, Jean-Pierre seemed to lose his relaxed attitude. He stopped smiling or making jokes. The score got closer, and we were only 10 points behind Morningside now. On the next play, Jean-Pierre got the ball again. I managed to take it away from him as he turned to face me. Annoyed, Jean-Pierre yelled, "Foul!" The referee said, "That was all ball." By the start of the fourth quarter, the game was getting tighter, with St. Thomas behind by 8 points. Surprisingly, Jean-Pierre hadn't scored since his free throws in the third quarter. My strong defense was working well. By the middle of the fourth quarter, Jean-Pierre's frustration grew. I tried to get under his skin with small gestures. On one play, he got the ball and went for a jump shot. I jumped with him, my hands up, but I lightly touched his shooting elbow. He missed the shot. He raised his voice as we ran up the court. I looked up at the stands and saw Melanie and her friends watching the game, no longer smiling. I couldn't hold back. The mix of my earlier shame, my competitive nature, and his arrogance became too much. As we ran up the court side by side, I said a little something to bother him. "Thanks for the tips on defense, John," I said, not using his full name. "Leave me alone," he replied, glaring at me. "I mean it, John, it really has been helpful." I kept going, staying calm. He didn't say anything, but nudged me slightly. I moved him closer to the referee by the baseline. "That last shot of yours was way off," I said with a laugh. This time, making sure the referee couldn't see, I nudged him back with a big grin. This pushed Jean-Pierre too far. Right in front of the referee, he shoved me. I stumbled back, making it look good for effect. Jean-Pierre got a technical foul and was sent out of the game. I lay on the floor, showing my acting skills. As he was taken to the locker room, our eyes met for a moment. Through my over-the-top expressions of pain, I made sure he saw a small smile. After Jean-Pierre got kicked out, I glanced up into the section where the visiting fans were sitting. The place where Melinda, Taylor, and their friends had been sitting was now empty. St. Thomas lost the game, but it was closer than we thought it would be. We celebrated in our locker room as if we had won. I later heard that college scouts were watching our game to see Jean-Pierre play. I felt a mix of pride and curiosity, wondering if I had somehow influenced his chances. Throughout my senior year, I occasionally saw Jean-Pierre and Melanie at school events or around town, but we never spoke. Finally, I had a chance to be near them at the senior prom. I had kept in touch with Taylor, who was my link to the popular girls led by Melanie. I was hoping Taylor would go to prom with me. I didn't have a girlfriend and didn't think she was dating anyone. I thought it would be fun, but when I asked her, she told me she was already going with someone, a college student. I began to think I'd miss out on my senior prom. 2 days later, I saw Taylor in the school hallway. "Are you still looking for a date for prom?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, feeling hopeful. "Well, my cousin Nicole is transferring here next year. This could be a great chance for her to see what our school is like." "But I've never met her. How old is she?" I asked. "Kevin, she's really nice. She'll be a junior next year and is really cute with dark hair." She added playfully, "Just remember to be polite." I thought about it. I really wanted to go to the prom, and Taylor was a good friend. This Nicole sounded good. "Okay," I said. "Give me her contact information." For the second time, I received a friendly gesture from Taylor and a warm thank you. I was going to the prom after all. Nicole was cute with dark hair, just like Taylor described. She wore a beautiful dress that fit her perfectly. At one point, she caught me looking at her, and I quickly looked away. "Look all you want, but keep your hands to yourself," she said playfully. "Understood," I replied with my own smile. I enjoyed the night, sharing laughs and chatting with her. Later at the dance, we were talking with Taylor when Melinda and Jean-Pierre came over. Jean-Pierre acted friendly but seemed to ignore me, not mentioning our past on the basketball court. It felt like he was pretending not to know me. I thought. I must have upset him during the game. Eventually, they left our small group. They were clearly the most attractive couple on the dance floor, catching everyone's attention. I watched them while Nicole and Taylor talked. Then, for a brief moment, Jean-Pierre glanced back at me, looking upset. My date with Nicole was enjoyable. If I weren't going off to college next year, I would have wanted to see where things could go with her. I had a much better time at the prom than I thought I would. As I walked her to her door, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Then she turned me around and playfully pushed me back down the walkway. "Good night, Kevin," she called as I made my way back to my car. I realized I kind of liked Nicole. I had a partial scholarship to the local university in the city. I still lived at home with my mom, just the two of us. I worked part-time for a neighbor on a construction crew, helping to build houses and contributing to our family budget. Jim Bueller, the owner of the construction crew, had many projects running and wanted me to work as much as I could. I had to balance work, school, and my homework. The scholarship required me to keep my grades at a 3, 0 or higher. Most of my friends from high school went to colleges far away. When they came home for breaks, they talked about living on their own in different towns, sharing stories about dorms, football games, and making new friends. Classes and homework rarely came up in their talks. My situation was different. I liked the idea of parties and meeting people, But my family's money issues and my desire to improve our lives drove me. I knew my college experience wouldn't be like my friends. My work was meant to help me in the future. I did go on a few dates, but my social life in college was not very exciting. I went to class, did my homework, lived at home, and worked at Bueller Construction. That was my routine for 4 years. By my senior year, I had a GPA of 3.2. It was okay, but not high enough to catch a lot of interest from graduate schools. I was also getting tired of school. I drove an old pickup truck with over 200,000 miles on it, and the driver's seat was worn out. I was ready to start my career and earn some money. Our college had a job fair in the spring of my senior year. Companies set up booths and students looked for job opportunities. I focused on 3 companies: Farm and Life Insurance, Procter & Gamble, and Van Dusen Forest Products. I liked these companies because they seemed genuinely interested in me. After the job fair, I left with contact details from people at those 3 companies. As I thought about my choices, I quickly crossed off the insurance company. It just wasn't for me. Strangely, I never heard back from Procter & Gamble, so I was left with Van Dusen Forest Products. Van Dusen was a big company that sold many building materials, including lumber from their own forests. I met with a company representative to talk about their products, job openings, and opportunities. After our conversation, the representative mentioned a job for an assistant product manager in Southern California. That sounded perfect to me. I was excited about moving from my hometown in the Pacific Northwest. After several interviews, I got a job offer from Van Dusen, which I happily accepted. I finished my spring term, and by the end of June, I was ready to start my new role as assistant product manager for import products at the Orange County office of Van Dusen Forest Products. I couldn't wait to begin. My boss was a seasoned product manager named Henry Proudfoot. At first, he seemed a bit tough and not very supportive. I had some background in lumber from my time at Bueller Construction, but Henry made things tricky. I quickly grew frustrated because I wanted to do well. I put a lot of effort into my work, but early on at Van Dusen, I felt like I was falling behind. One weekend, after a difficult week, I went for a long run on the beach in Orange County. As I ran, I thought about my struggles at work. I remembered how I had faced and overcome challenges in my life before, and suddenly, I knew what I had to do. I decided to work harder. On Monday, I asked Henry for a key to the office. "Why do you need a key?" he asked. I explained that I might want to be at my desk after hours. After a moment, he handed me a key. From that day on, I came to the office by 5:30 a.m. every day. I used the quiet time to study products, look at market trends, and reach out to people in different time zones. I started to grasp how the business worked, and I could tell my efforts were starting to show. One day, 2 important executives from the main office came to visit. I saw them in the conference room with our manager. The room had glass walls, so I could see them clearly. One executive was tall and serious, dressed nicely in a sport coat and neat pants. The other was younger and more casual, with his shirt slightly out of place. He seemed full of energy. A little while later, Henry's office phone rang. After a quick chat, he got up to join the meeting. The 4 of them talked together, and at one point, Henry looked out of the conference room and nodded in my direction. I noticed the taller executive glance my way, too. I quickly turned my gaze back to my computer screen, trying to block out the sounds of the meeting happening in the conference room. A few minutes later, I noticed Henry walking back towards my area with 2 other people. I kept my head down, focusing on my work. Before I knew it, they were standing at my cubicle. "Kevin," Henry said, "I want you to meet Jack Valentine and Charlie Flanagan." I looked up and saw the friendly face of the tall executive. I recognized the names. "Kevin, this is Jack Valentine." He reached out for a handshake. I nervously bumped into my desk as I stood to greet them. "And this is Charlie Flanagan," the other man added, also offering his hand. "Nice to meet you," I said, nodding to both of them. "So, how do you like working at Van Dusen?" Jack asked with enthusiasm. "Yes, Mr. Valentine," I started. "I enjoy it so far. It's quite challenging." I began, but was cut off. Charlie chimed in, looking at his phone. "Jack, I need to take this call." He hurried away without giving me much attention. I saw Jack briefly shake his head. Jack then turned back to me and continued our chat. "First off, it's Jack, not Mr. Valentine. I've heard great things about your work, Kevin. Have you considered your future here? There's definitely a career path for you," he said. Thank you, Jack. I like what I'm doing, and Henry has been really helpful, I replied, grateful for the support. I especially enjoy the international part of the job, finding materials in different places, I explained to Jack. He listened carefully and nodded, then turned to Henry. There's a trip planned to South America early next year, he suggested. Why not include Kevin? I saw surprise on Henry's face for a moment. Sure, Jack, he replied. Great, Jack said, then turned back to me. It was nice to finally meet you. Keep up the good work. If you need anything, feel free to reach out to me, he said, handing me his business card. With that, Jack Valentine left. A bit later, Henry stopped by my desk. Kid, he said, I'm really proud of you. Jack Valentine is a vice president. For him to notice you and suggest you for an international trip is a big deal. And if you shine, it reflects well on me, too. Thanks, Henry, I said, feeling grateful. I appreciate all you've done, I added. Just remember, he said with a smile, don't mess it up. He playfully tapped my shoulder and walked away. I felt very happy about the attention from Jack Valentine. I kept thinking back to the beginning of the evening. I also thought briefly about Charlie Flanagan. I didn't talk to him much, but there was something about him I didn't like. I couldn't quite explain it. I just didn't feel comfortable around him. Work was going well for me at the Orange County branch of VDFP, Van Dusen Forest Products. I kept arriving early and putting in a lot of effort. I knew that I was helping the company, and at the end of the third quarter, I got a bonus of $2,500. My job life was good, but my social life was a bit uneven. I hung out with a few younger colleagues. Sometimes on the weekends, we would go to the bars in Huntington or Laguna Beach. One Friday, a younger coworker named Tim mentioned that a vendor named Julia Mitchell was taking the team out for drinks after work and invited me to come along. I had seen Julia in the office, and she definitely stood out. I hadn't spoken to her before, but I had definitely noticed her. Julia was tall, close to 6 feet, especially with the high heels she wore. She liked stylish clothes and a bit of makeup. She was quite slim. In an office mostly filled with men, she was certainly noticeable. I figured she knew that and used her presence in a smart way. I had always been curious about her, so I agreed to meet them. We were headed to Windfire, a nice bar in Laguna Beach. When I got to the bar, I saw Neil and Tim from my office sitting at one of the fire pits outside. Just as I arrived, Julia walked in. Great to meet you, Kevin, Julia said with a smile. I've heard about you. It's nice to finally meet. Her handshake felt warm and friendly. Yeah, Neil added. Kevin's doing really well at VD. He's meeting all the important people. Really? Julia said, seeming even more interested. That's not entirely true, I started to say. Oh, come on, Tim said jokingly. So, what do you do at Van Dusen? Julia asked. Suddenly we were chatting, just the two of us, by the fire pit. The night went by quickly. Somehow, drinks kept arriving, and I vaguely remembered someone ordering food. At one point, I noticed Neil and Tim leaving, but the lively atmosphere, the drinks, and Julia made everything feel enjoyable and relaxed. Throughout the night, Julia seemed to focus a lot on me. She asked about my job and my life. Not only was she attractive, but she was also smart and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. I hadn't dated much during my time in California, and it was clear that I was starting to like Julia more than I expected. As the evening started to wind down, I finally spoke up. Well, I said with a laugh, I lost track after my third drink. I don't want to drive back to Buena Park. I should just order an Uber, I said as I stood up. Why not come over to my place? I can make you a coffee, Julia suggested. It's just 3 blocks away. That made sense. It would be a pain to come back here to get my car today with so many people at the beach. As we walked, I started to think about whether this was just a friendly offer. I had been in situations like this before, but I had never engaged with someone from work. Feeling a bit unsure, we arrived at Julia's apartment. I live alone, she said as we climbed the stairs to her second-floor home. I tried having roommates, she continued, unlocking the door, but I guess I like my independence. She smiled warmly. Once we were in her living room, I felt a nice connection between us. The atmosphere was cozy, and the lights of Laguna Beach sparkled in the distance through the windows. We started talking more closely, sharing our thoughts and exchanging smiles. It was a lovely evening, just enjoying each other's company. At one point, she leaned in and asked, Kevin, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, I replied, appreciating her care. She took a moment, looking thoughtful. "I want to make sure we're both clear about things," she said. "I like to be open." I nodded, grateful for her straightforwardness. "I feel the same way," I said, wanting to keep our conversation going. The evening continued with light-hearted chatter and common interests, bringing us closer together. Julia and I spent the evening near the warmth of the fire. After a while, we found ourselves relaxing close to each other, enjoying the gentle glow. Later, we had fallen asleep side by side, and I could feel our connection growing. I woke up early, watching her sleep peacefully. Our time together had been special, and I realized that I was starting to really like her. She was smart, attractive, and had a warm personality. The next morning, we shared a quiet moment, laughing softly as we got ready for the day. Our bond felt stronger, and I began to hope this could lead to something more. I appreciated the nice time we had together. Since she had paid for dinner the night before, I assumed it was on her work expense account, so I insisted on taking her out for breakfast. As we left the diner, we paused on the sidewalk. My car was parked in one direction, and her condo was in the opposite direction. I'd invite you back to the condo," she started, but then she glanced around and said quietly, "But I'm a bit tired." We both laughed at that. Then I looked at her more seriously. "Julia," I said, "I'd like to see you again." She nodded, a bit unsure, saying she had a work trip to Northern California this week, but what about next weekend? I got her contact information and told her I would call her later. She gave me a quick kiss goodbye and turned to walk home. I stood there watching her leave, feeling that I really liked her. That week at work, Neil and Tim teased me gently, suggesting something special happened between Julia and me after they left. I kindly denied it, but I was excited about this new friendship. I texted her on Wednesday, asking about this weekend. I didn't hear back right away, but I knew everyone communicates differently. Finally, I got a message Thursday evening. "Friday night, Newport Beach? I know a great place there," I agreed, and we set up to meet at 6 p.m. I arrived 15 minutes early, but she showed up 20 minutes late. Being on time mattered to me, so I had to hold back my frustration. We enjoyed drinks, walked along the beach, and then had dinner reservations at 8 p.m. The meal was delicious, and I really enjoyed it. Afterward, she invited me back to her place, which I was glad about. We had another good evening together, enjoying each other's company, and I felt she was happy with how the night went. This time, we both fell asleep peacefully without any pressure from either side. I had hoped for a little shared morning time, but that didn't happen. "Oh my gosh," Julia suddenly said. "What time is it?" She sat up in bed. "It's 7:24 a.m., I told her. She hurried to the bathroom, and I heard the flush before she rushed back out, still in her pajamas. She looked great, and I felt a wave of fondness. "Kevin, I'm sorry," she said. "I have to be somewhere by 9 a.m. I hate to ask you to leave after such a nice evening, but I need to get going." "Don't we have time for a quick moment together?" I asked hopefully. She smiled gently. "I would love that another time," she said, "but not today. I really have to get ready and you need to head out." She came over, gave me a goodbye kiss, and we had a brief, sweet moment before saying goodbye. I reached out for her, but she playfully moved away. I sat there, keeping my distance as she got ready. I slowly dressed, knocked on the bathroom door twice, and then left. On my drive to Buena Park, I thought about Julia. I really liked her, and we always had fun together. I also felt she liked me back. She often said things that made me think our relationship was getting stronger. I hoped it would last. We continued to date, mostly on weekends. I often found myself spending time at her place. We always felt a special bond when we were together. After dating for about 2 months, we hadn't talked about being exclusive or committed yet. I thought it was time to have that conversation. My thoughts wandered, imagining what our relationship could become. This felt different from my past experiences. It felt more meaningful. I decided that when the moment was right, I would talk to Julia about being exclusive and taking our relationship to the next level. That Friday night, I tried several times to bring up our relationship, but we kept getting interrupted and never had the chance to talk. Later that night, I got a text from her. "Thanks for last night." That made me feel hopeful, and I thought we would surely talk that weekend. On Tuesday, I messaged her about our weekend plans. I didn't hear back until Thursday night. "Hey, a bunch of us are gathering at H2O in Laguna this Friday at 7 p.m. "You should come," she texted. It wasn't exactly what I was hoping for, but it made me feel a bit better. I arrived shortly after 7 and saw Julia with a group of 4 guys and 2 girls. She introduced me to everyone, and they seemed friendly. As the night went on, I realized I wasn't getting much time alone with Julia. One of the guys, who seemed well off, was getting a lot of her attention, just like I once did. I chatted with the others, but I wanted more time with Julia. At one point, I followed her to the bathroom and was close by when she came out. "Hey, you," she said. "Are you having a good time?" She had a bright smile. "I can think of a way for us to have even more fun," I said lightly. "I know what you're hinting at," she replied with a teasing push before heading back to the group. Feeling let down, I followed her. It was getting pretty late, after 11 p.m., and I knew I couldn't stay at Julia's. I had a 20-minute drive back home. I decided to stop drinking. Soon I noticed the group was starting to break up. My hopes for a closer bond with Julia rose again, but just as quickly, they faded. "Kevin, James knows where there's a party. Please come with us," Julia asked me. By this time, I was feeling tired of the evening. The people were nice, but I really just wanted to spend time with Julia, and it didn't seem like that would happen. I declined. Julia gave me a quick hug, and then they left. On the drive home, I felt frustrated with Julia, but I thought about it more. I wanted a different relationship than she seemed to want. That wasn't her fault, though. We hadn't decided on being exclusive yet. I hoped our connection was more than just friendship with some nice times together. With that in mind, I drove back to my apartment, feeling let down about what seemed to be the end of our short relationship. I guessed that, like many people, Julia liked to explore her options. I kept wishing to hear from her. This week felt like it was her turn to reach out to me. My phone buzzed often, but it was never her. For the first time in almost 2 months, I spent the weekend without her. That weekend, while I was out jogging, I scolded myself for getting carried away with my hopes. I had done this before, first with Taylor in high school and now with Julia. I thought we had something real, but it seemed we saw things differently. I promised myself to keep my expectations in check for future dating. On Monday morning, I was back at work, still thinking about Julia, but my thoughts were fading. I noticed Henry and a few others arriving closer to 8 a.m. I was focused on my tasks when Henry came over to my desk. "Hey, do you have a passport?" Henry asked. "No," I replied. "You're going to Brazil in 7 weeks. You need to get that sorted," he told me. Suddenly, my sad thoughts about Julia vanished. I was going out of the country for the first time. I needed to get my passport and decided to learn more about the area we would visit. I also called a senior manager from our headquarters to gather information. I found out we would be based in Paranagua and travel into the rainforest by car and boat. We would meet with the plantation owners, which included the local indigenous people. They were from the Ticuna tribe, and I learned that some spoke Portuguese and English. I knew we sourced tropical hardwood from Brazil, which was popular in the building industry. But I also understood there were concerns about the deforestation of the rainforest. There had to be a way to combine the timber harvest with a plan for the environment, I thought. As the trip to South America got closer, I kept up my long hours at work and researched the area we would be visiting. A few weeks before our departure, I was reading an article about the Ticuna when I noticed someone standing by my cubicle. I looked up and saw Julia. "Hey there!" She greeted me with a bright smile. She looked great, and for a moment I remembered our past connection. "Hi, Julia," I said after a brief pause. I stood and reached out my hand to shake hers, but she hugged me instead. "I was just chatting with the team about some new things we're working on and wanted to say hello," she said. "It's been too long," she said with a meaningful look. "I know," I replied. "I'm going on a trip the week after next, and we've both been busy," I added to explain. "I know," she agreed. "I think we all are." I nodded, showing my understanding. "Well," she said, "call me sometime." She turned to walk away. "I will," I answered, but I wasn't sure if I would. She looked back at me, seeming to wonder why I seemed so distant. I valued my friendship with Julia, but I wanted to be clear about what we meant to each other, which might not be the same as what she thought. I reminded myself to keep my expectations in check and to take things slowly in new friendships. Soon, I found myself on a flight to Brazil. It took all day to reach Paranagua. The next day, we would travel up the river to the plantations. There were 4 of us from Van Duzen, myself, 2 senior buyers from Tacoma, and a seasoned product manager from Denver named Martim Francisco. Martim spoke Portuguese and had contacts in Brazil. The first several days were spent visiting different plantations. We stayed in simple but comfortable places. One of the buyers from Tacoma got sick and had to go back home. I loved it there. It was exciting to learn about new products and experience the local culture and scenery. The tropical rainforest was fascinating. I tried to learn as much as I could. Even though I had heard about the challenges of the rainforest and the basic living conditions, none of it bothered me. I was enjoying my time. On our next to last day, we went deep into the forest and met the indigenous people, the Ticuna. I noticed that the Ticuna were smaller and had darker skin than the other Brazilians we had met. They wore clothes, but it looked like a mix of different items. That night, we stayed in the Ticuna village. There was a dinner in one of their large community buildings. I learned that the hardwood from the Ticuna plantations was more desirable, but also more expensive to harvest and ship. It was seen as a premium product. At dinner, we all sat around a big table, the 3 of us from Van Duzen, our Brazilian agent, and about a dozen Ticuna men. I sat next to Martim, and on my other side was a Ticuna named Mafi, who I later found out was one of the elders. I introduced myself, and the smiling Mafi shook my hand warmly. "I am Mafi," he said with a smile. His English was a bit choppy, but I could mostly understand him. Mafi talked about his life and how things were changing for the Ticuna. Development was coming, and the Ticuna needed to find a way to balance these changes while keeping their traditions alive. He shared his thoughts about the difficulties he was facing. "It's a big problem," he said, referring to the challenges ahead. "What do you mean?" I asked. Mafi tried to explain, but I had a hard time understanding. "After dinner," he said, "I'll show you." He seemed excited, nodding his head. After we ate, Mafi and 2 other Ticuna took me outside the big building where we had dined. We walked along a path next to the river. On the left, through some bushes, I saw a large place where children were playing happily nearby. We walked up some steps, and Mafi opened the door to a room with simple beds and bedding spread on the floor. A curtain divided the room in half. "Girls on this side," he pointed. "Boys on the other side," he explained. Suddenly it all made sense. With so many children and not many adults around, Mafi was talking about orphans. "Mafi," I asked, "why are there so many?" Mafi sighed, and for the first time his smile faded. "Kevin," he said, "life for the Ticuna is hard. Parents often leave us too soon. We have to take care of the children," he said, looking at the Ticuna kids. As we walked back, Mafi told me they needed more help to support the children and the village. Selling timber was one of their few ways to make money. "We also need to plant more trees," Mafi said. "We need trees for the children's future." I nodded, thinking about Mafi and the Ticuna. Despite their situation, the children's laughter brought me hope. It gave me a lot to think about. When we returned to camp, Mafi showed me his small home. It was cozy and very clean. There, he gave me a slip of paper with his email and phone number. I was surprised to learn he had internet access. I asked Mafi about it. "There's an internet cafe in Obidos," he told me, pointing east. I gave him my Van Duzen business card. He hugged me goodbye, and I headed to my lodging for the night. I spent hours reflecting on the Ticuna, Mafi, and the orphans. Before I knew it, we were back on the jet heading home. It was a great experience for work, but I still couldn't forget the human side of the trip. I promised myself I would try to help the Ticuna. My job at Van Duzen continued, and I was asked to join more teams. I got invites to more customer meetings. My position at Van Duzen Forest Products was growing. I felt proud of my effort and enjoyed my work. The recognition was a nice bonus. One day, Henry unexpectedly asked me out for lunch. I usually ate at my desk and didn't socialize much with him. He took me to Billy's Ink Spot, a restaurant he liked. The atmosphere was warm, with a big bar, and the food was surprisingly good. "Kid," he still called me that. "I've been hearing some things about you," he added. "What?" I asked, feeling a bit nervous. "What's going on?" "Relax, relax," he said. "I'm hearing good things." "Don't be surprised if you get a call from Jack Valentine about a job chance at corporate," Henry said. They like you, kid. They want to help you move up fast." I sat there thinking about what Henry had said. I knew I was doing well, but I was surprised that I might get a chance for a promotion this soon. I thought about my job. I liked the company and most of the people. I was starting to really enjoy the building products industry. I was especially interested in the international side of my work and remembered my trip to Brazil when I met Mafi and the Takuna tribe. "Thanks, Henry, for all your help so far," I said, even though it wasn't much. I didn't want to say that out loud. "I'm looking forward to hearing from Jack," I added. The idea of a promotion got me excited. Now, whenever my phone rang or I saw an email, I thought it could be Jack Valentine with a great opportunity. That Friday, our corporate office sent a message to everyone. They announced that Van Duzen was dedicated to helping the environment. The presentation included pictures of leaves, the ocean, and big forests. The goal was to show that our company wanted to do more for the planet and advertise that commitment. Helen Stacy from marketing was asking for ideas to help Van Duzen improve its eco-friendly image. Since my trip to Brazil, I had been thinking about a project. What if we supported the Takuna in replanting native trees? This could solve many issues, like ensuring a future supply of tropical wood. It would give the Takuna some necessary income and match what we wanted to show to our customers about being green. Over the weekend, I put together a plan for this. I even suggested that we match donations to help the local orphanage. By my calculations, the total cost would be just over 5% of our overall expenses. I thought we could manage that small increase. On Sunday night, I sent my presentation to Helen Stacy. All week, I waited to hear back about my idea, but I hadn't heard from Jack Valentine either. My excitement about my project and the chance to hear from Jack started to fade, and I thought for sure I would hear something soon. The following week, I got a call from corporate, and I thought it was Jack Valentine. "Hello, Kevin." It was a woman's voice, not Jack's. "This is Helen Stacy from marketing. How are you?" She told me that she had taken my reforestation plan to management and received approval. The next step was to present the plan to the Takuna and make an agreement. "When can you be in Brazil?" she asked. I was stunned. "I get to go back!" I stumbled over my words, but luckily, she didn't seem to notice my confusion. "Let me tell you," she said. "I'll get in touch with corporate travel to book your trip. How about leaving on the 17th? I'll send you an email with the details." And then she was gone. Wow, they not only liked my idea, but I was going back to help put the plan into action. Later that week, I received information about my travel to Brazil. I would be going with someone from our forest science team who would share planting methods with the Takuna people. Meanwhile, I emailed Mafi. 2 weeks later, he responded, welcoming my visit. The Friday before I was set to leave, I finally heard from Jack Valentine. "Kevin," Jack said, "I hear you're going back to South America. Congratulations on your idea. Good thinking." He paused for a moment and added, "When you return, I want you to fly up to corporate. I have some thoughts about your future to discuss." "Thank you, sir." Jack," I said. "I would appreciate that." With that, it felt like my career was heading in a positive direction. The trip to Brazil went smoothly. I traveled with Jerry Matthews, the forest science expert. He was a nice guy and fairly quiet. If we weren't discussing trees, our conversation was pretty low-key. We returned to the same Takuna village where I had visited before. Mafi greeted me warmly. That night, Jerry and I presented our ideas for tree planting and the compensation. It took some time to communicate our plans clearly. Then a group of Takuna, including Mafi, discussed what I assumed was our proposal in their language. After a lengthy conversation, Mafi turned to me with his big smile, shook my hand, and said, "Kevin, we have a deal." The rest of the trip was spent working out details and techniques. There was a lot to cover. "Kevin," Jerry said to me on our second to last day, "I almost forgot. I was asked to take some photos of you and the Takuna in the rainforest, not sure why." That's interesting, I thought. So the next day, we took some pictures. That night, I found myself back at the large dining table with Mafi. After dinner, I asked if we could visit the orphans again. With a big smile, he agreed. We walked along the trail through the brush, and suddenly I heard it before I saw anything. It was like music, the most beautiful sound. I heard laughter through the leaves, and I knew we were close to the orphanage. Mafi and I paused as I felt emotional watching the children laugh and play. It made me think deeply about my own values. These children had very little, not even parents, yet their happiness and joy for life were so strong. It was a successful trip, and all too soon, Jerry and I were heading back. I felt proud of our mission's success and sensed that this achievement could help my career at Van Dusen. More importantly, I was glad that some of my ideas might make a positive difference in the lives of others. ###, the lives of the Takuna. I was back in the office for just 2 days when I learned I needed to be at corporate by Thursday night. I had dinner planned with Jack Valentine and Charlie Flanagan. Corporate travel took care of everything, and I got the schedule. Dinner on Thursday, a meeting at the branch on Friday morning, and a flight out on Friday evening. We met at a restaurant by the water called Willapa Bay. It felt a bit like a job interview mixed with a sales meeting. Jack was excitedly talking about the chances my career could take, while also asking me how I would deal with different business situations. Sometimes, Malarkey would jump in with a question that seemed to try and make me look worse to Jack. I didn't really like him much, and it didn't help that he looked a bit messy, with bits of food in his unkempt mustache. Dinner ended on a mostly good note, and the next day we gathered at the corporate branch at Crescent Creek. The Crescent Creek office was modern and nearly twice the size of my office in Orange County. The conference room was all glass and much bigger than mine. There was a lot more happening, too. Phones were ringing, and I could hear many people chatting about products, shipments, and sales. It felt like an exciting place. A young receptionist took me to the conference room. There, I met Janet Haynes, who said she was the HR specialist. I saw a file folder in front of her. About 10 minutes later, Jack and Charlie arrived. "Kevin," Jack said with a friendly smile, "we want you on our team. There's a position for a product manager at our main corporate branch. This job is different from what you do in California. The business is nearly 3 times as large here, and things move much faster. You'll also work more with the sales team and meet clients." "That sounds great, Jack," I replied. "Is there an offer?" "Janet has all the details," Charlie added. "You'll work with the branch," Jack explained. "But Charlie will be your manager for import products." We talked a bit more, and then Janet presented the offer. I was amazed. It was nearly double what I was making. I spent some time filling out paperwork with Janet, and she showed me around, introducing me to different people. At 11 a.m., Jack drove me to the airport. "Son," he advised, "if I could give you one piece of advice, it would be this. Invest in real estate, anything you can. This market is going to grow. In fact, it's already starting. You'll be happy you did." We arrived at the airport quickly. With handshakes and good wishes, I set off to start fresh in California with Van Dusen Forest products. The next 3 months flew by. Before leaving Orange County, I took Jack's suggestion and reached out to a real estate agent in Crescent Creek. They organized a farewell party for me back in Orange County, and Julia even showed up. At one point, she asked for a ride home. I felt tempted but decided to decline, promising to get in touch next time I was in town, knowing I probably wouldn't. After I arrived, I bought a house in Wildwood, close to my old high school, St. Thomas. It took me about 15 minutes to get to my new office, even with traffic. Not too bad. The house had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, plus a dry, unfinished basement. It was structurally sound but needed a lot of work, and the yard was very overgrown. When I closed on the house, I was surprised to see that the listing agent was Melinda Manning, someone I remembered from high school. At first, she didn't seem to recognize me. I kept watching her, and then it seemed to dawn on her. "Kevin?" she asked. "Hey, we went to high school together, right? Do you remember me?" "Hi, Melinda," I replied. "Of course, I remember you." Then we started talking. We reminisced about people we both knew from high school. "Let's grab a soft drink or a coffee after we finish here," she suggested with a bright smile. I quickly agreed. There was a Starbucks just a block away. I noticed Melinda looked different from how I remembered. Still very pretty, but just a bit fuller. She caught me looking. "I'm 3 months along," she said. I was confused and asked, "You're what?" "I'm due in March," she replied. Then I realized. "You're having a baby?" I said, surprised. "How did that happen?" She paused, wearing a slight smile. "If you remember from 6th grade health class," she started, "a couple comes together and starts a family." "I understand," I chuckled, cutting her off. We kept chatting. She explained that she and John Pierre got married a few years after high school. They already had a little girl, Esme, who was 16 months old. It sounded like being pregnant now was a big reason for their marriage. "After this baby," she added, "I'm getting my tubes tied." I was taken aback by how open our conversation was. In high school, we rarely spoke. She seemed more popular than I was. Now we were discussing personal details of her life. She also shared that when she first found out she was pregnant with Esme, she decided to take her real estate exam. She really enjoyed selling real estate and became successful quite quickly. "What does John Pierre do?" I asked. I expected her to say he was a CEO, an investment banker, or a professional athlete. "Right now," she began, and I could tell she was unsure. "He's selling cars at Katie's," she said, avoiding eye contact with me. I thought. The star from high school was finding life a bit harder, it seemed. I kept quiet. We talked a bit more, and she mentioned that she and her old friends from high school usually had a girls' night out every few weeks. She told me Taylor sometimes joined these events, the same Taylor Pilkington I had a crush on during high school. Eventually, it was time to go. This time, I got a full hug goodbye. Back in high school, I never even got a handshake from Melinda. Now I was getting a hug? "Say hello to Taylor for me next time you see her," I said to Melinda. She didn't answer, but she gave me a look as we left, a look I didn't quite understand. For the next 2 years, I would say my life was good. Professionally, I was growing in my job. I was one of the youngest product managers in Van Duzen's history. I was also more involved in the sales process. I met the head buyer at McLean's Lumber, Alan Church, and we quickly became friends. We bought a quarter interest in Mariner season tickets together and hung out often. This was important since McLean's was our second largest account from the Crescent Creek branch. It was nice to do business with someone you truly liked. One other thing that got me a lot of attention at work was when Van Duzen launched their environmental green media campaign. There was a photo of me and Mafi in the rainforest. I was pointing to something, and Mafi was looking in the same direction. The forest, river, and sunlight came together for a natural, candid shot. Jerry Matthews took the photo on our trip to Brazil together. Van Duzen invested a lot in this environmental campaign, and my image often appeared in it. My idea and this photo made me somewhat of a known figure at Van Duzen. This likely helped my career, I thought. I also enjoyed my life outside of work. I spent time with Alan and some younger guys at VDFP. I also hung out with a few women. After everything with Julia, I promised myself to date casually. I made it clear early on with any women I spent time with that I wasn't looking for a long-term, exclusive relationship. There were a few hurt feelings along the way, but I had been honest from the start. Then I found myself feeling hurt too. I had been spending time with a young woman named Jilly, who worked in the corporate office of VDFP and not at my branch. She was charming and small in stature. After our second get-together, I told her, "I'm not looking for a serious relationship. I wanted to make sure we understood each other clearly." Jilly didn't seem bothered by what I said, and we continued to enjoy each other's company. Before I knew it, I really started to enjoy being with her. We grew closer, and I looked forward to our time together. One Saturday morning, I met Alan for our usual run in Prospect Park. After our run, we liked to grab some coffee and relax at an outdoor cafe in the town square. This area was lively, filled with people enjoying their weekend. As we sipped our coffee that morning, Alan nodded toward the plaza. "Hey, isn't that the woman you were with a few weeks ago?" he asked. I turned and saw Jilly walking toward us with another guy holding hands. They were headed right for us, and she hadn't noticed me yet. "Yes," I replied to Alan. "I think it is." Suddenly, they were right next to us, and I had to pull my legs back to avoid a mishap. "Kevin," Jilly said, surprised but not embarrassed. "Hi, this is Brock." She introduced us. We exchanged a few words before they walked away, still holding hands. As Jilly left, she looked back, smiled, and waved her fingers at me. I felt a bit shocked. I noticed their hair looked damp, as if they had just come from a shower. Had they showered together? I knew I shouldn't feel upset. I had set the terms of our relationship. Yet for some reason I felt a slight discomfort. I reminded myself not to get too serious with anyone I spent time with. That worked for a while. About 2 years after I moved to Wildwood, I found myself at another Mariners game that ended in a loss. Once again, I was with Alan, and we decided to stop at a busy bar not far from Safeco Field. We agreed to have one drink and then call it a night. The bar was called Bellflower, and it was packed. We found the only empty seat at the bar and settled in to talk about the game. Shortly after we arrived, I noticed a group of women at a booth across from us. At first, in the low light, I didn't recognize them, but there was something familiar about the group. After a moment, I realized the blonde was Taylor Pilkington. I couldn't see Melinda, but I could hear her voice. This must have been the girls' night out she had talked about. I walked over to them. "Can I get you guys a drink?" I asked as I approached. "No, thanks," Melinda replied without looking at me. But then Taylor seemed to recognize me. "Kevin, is that you?" Taylor said with excitement. "How are you all doing?" I asked, smiling. Taylor stood up and gave me a friendly hug. I realized this was the closest we had ever been, even more than our few dates back in high school. Then Melinda stood up and hugged me, too. She seemed to be having a good time, and despite the Mariners' loss, I hoped the night would turn out well. We all gathered together, and I found a chair to join them. I introduced Alan, but he said he needed to get up early, so it was just Taylor, Melinda, 2 other friends from high school, and me. We talked as the evening went on. I only had 2 beers because I needed to drive while the girls had arranged for other rides. As the night went on, it was clear some of the girls were feeling a bit tipsy. I shared about my job at VDFP, and one of the girls recognized me. "So, you're the one in those pictures from the jungle?" she asked. She knew about the Van Dusen environmental project, and I felt a bit proud. I learned that Taylor had a boyfriend who was sometimes on and off. Right now, they were together. Melinda had 2 kids, aged 3.5 and 2. She mentioned she wasn't with John Pierre anymore. She also told me her dad was sick and that her mom was his full-time caregiver. Melinda did what she could to help, but being a single mom with a full-time job was hard. "These nights out," she said, "are my chance to enjoy myself." It was strange to think that the most popular girl in high school now faced everyday challenges like everyone else. As the night came to a close, I asked how everyone was getting home. I was feeling fine. I had been drinking water for the last hour. Both Taylor and Melinda lived nearby, and the other 2 friends seemed fine with their rides. Melinda and Taylor accepted my offer to drive them home. On the way, I dropped Taylor off at her apartment. She thanked me, and as I held the door open, she hugged me warmly. I thought it was too bad she had a boyfriend. Melinda lived in a condo not far from mine. She sank into the passenger seat, and when I stopped in front of her building, she didn't immediately get out. Melinda," I said gently, "you're home." She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment before saying, "I know. Can we just sit here for a minute?" I understood that she needed a little time before facing her life again. 2 small children, work stress, and her father's health problems were heavy on Melinda's mind. "You know," Melinda started, her gaze fixed on me, "you're a good guy, Kevin Gerard." Normally, I might have replied, but for some reason, I didn't say anything. Then, out of the blue, she leaned in, wrapped her arms around me in a friendly hug, and it threw me off a bit. But she pulled back, looking thoughtful for a moment. After a short pause, she smiled softly and said goodbye before getting out of the car. "Call me Kevin Gerard," she said as she shut the door and walked toward her building. I sat there for a moment, trying to understand what had just happened. "Call me," she had said. The most attractive girl from high school wanted me to call her? Was it the drinks talking? I would find out soon enough. The next day, I called Melinda. At first, I thought I had made a mistake. She didn't seem too excited to hear from me, and there was some noise in the background. Eventually, I asked if she'd like to go out for dinner next weekend. "Yeah," she replied. "Let me see what I can set up. I'll call you back." Her voice lacked enthusiasm, and that was that. Honestly, I didn't expect her to call again. After no call by Tuesday, I figured maybe there wouldn't be a date after all. But on Wednesday night around 9, she surprised me by calling. "Hey," she said, "are we still on for this weekend?" "Yes," I replied. "I can find a babysitter for Friday night," she said. "Will that work?" So we agreed on Friday night. I told her to dress casually and that I'd pick her up at 7. We had a nice time together, talking and laughing. I learned a bit about her life with John Pierre. From what she shared, Melinda and John Pierre had broken up in high school but reunited a few years later. She had their daughter, Esme, and they got married. Then they welcomed another daughter, Francine. Jean-Pierre struggled to keep a job. He tried selling cars and did well when he focused on it. But they often fought about money, and he didn't seem to take fatherhood seriously. Eventually, he left, and they got divorced. "Okay," Melinda said, shifting the conversation. "Enough about me. What about you? You still live in the same place, right?" It seemed like most of our chat had been about her. My life felt pretty quiet compared to hers. No kids, no marriages. I told her about my job, and she encouraged me to share more details. She seemed more interested in what the job could offer her, like career growth and better pay, rather than the job itself. I felt a little pleased that I had done better than Jean-Pierre in this situation. That night, Melinda gave me a heartfelt goodbye without too much to drink. "Call me this week," she said softly when we said our goodbyes. And I did. The next time I picked her up, I met her daughters, Esme and Francine. They were cute, and I could tell they would grow up to be lovely, just like their mom. Esme was the older one, shyly holding onto her mom's leg and glancing at me before looking away when I noticed her. Francine, being younger, was full of energy. She eagerly wanted to show me her toys and stuffed animals. As we got ready to leave, she insisted on coming with us. I must admit, the little girls won me over. During our outing, we talked about the girls and how Jean-Pierre wasn't really helping with raising them or supporting them financially. It puzzled me why he didn't want to spend time with those sweet girls. Later that evening, I had a thought that made me pause. I kept reminding myself to take things easy with Melinda, not to rush. But then I asked, "How would you like to go to the zoo tomorrow?" "The zoo? Just me?" she replied, surprised. I chuckled and said, No, you and the girls." She looked into my eyes for a moment, serious, and then turned her gaze out the window. "Mel," I asked, uncertain about what she'd say. Suddenly, she turned to me with a smile. "Sure, the girls would love that." The next day was enjoyable. The weather was nice, and we walked around the Woodland Park Zoo. Esme, though still shy, began to relax a bit. Francine was happily chatting away. We had lunch at the zoo, and Francine started to get tired. "Mom, will you carry me?" she asked, reaching her arms up. Melinda lifted her as we continued exploring. After a little while, I felt a little hand in mine and looked down to see Esme smiling up at me. We walked hand in hand, and I smiled back. I kept reminding myself to take it slow, but I couldn't help feeling joyful being with Melinda and her adorable daughters. When it was time to say goodbye, Francine hugged me tightly. As I bent down to say goodbye to Esme, she shyly hugged me too. I couldn't stop smiling. The biggest surprise came when I went to say goodbye to Melinda. I knew there wouldn't be a big goodbye with the girls around, but when she said goodbye, I saw tears in her eyes as she smiled at me. I felt like I was getting in too deep. That week at work, I wandered through the warehouse, which I liked to do from time to time. I could check the inventory on my computer, but I enjoyed seeing the items in person. While looking around, I spotted some low-quality lumber in a bin. I wanted to check it out better, so I bent down to see the other side. Suddenly, I felt a twinge in my lower back. Just then, one of the warehouse workers, Albert, rushed over. "Boss, that looks heavy," Albert said. "Let me help you." Together, we moved the lumber, and I got a good view of it. I thanked Albert and walked back to my office. I thought about him as I did. I had noticed pictures of his kids on his desk. It reminded me of Melinda's daughters. During the week, I tried reaching out to Melinda, but by Thursday, we hadn't talked. I told myself to take it easy. Then, on Thursday night, we finally connected. "What a week," she started. "First, Jean-Pierre missed his night with the girls. He said something came up. Then my mom needed help with my dad. She really needs more support, but it's hard and expensive to find help." "I'm sorry," I replied. "How are you?" she asked. "Okay," I said. My back was bothering me more. She asked about my week, and I felt guilty sharing my back pain compared to her struggles. But I did. Soon after, she said she'd call me back. 45 minutes later, she called again. "Okay," she said. "Pick up some fish and 2 bottles of wine. I'll meet you at your house this Friday at 7. That's all you need to know." And then she hung up. I thought to myself, this could be interesting. On Friday, just after 7, she arrived. She had a bag of groceries and a folding table. She wore casual clothes, ready for something active. "Here, she said, handing me the groceries. "Put these in the fridge." When I returned, she had set up the table and handed me a light robe. "Take a quick shower," she said. "Then we can work on your back." I had questions, but I decided to go along with it. I took my shower, my mind wandering as I got ready. She had placed some nice candles in the living room and dimmed the lights. "Lie on the table, face down, and show me where it hurts," she instructed. I did as she said. I opened the robe a little, feeling a bit shy. Then she started to massage my back. It began easing the tension, and I instantly felt better. Next, she worked on my upper back and shoulders. "Wow, Melinda," I said softly. "This feels wonderful." "How did you learn this?" I asked. "Just relax and enjoy," she replied. And I did. At first, it felt like a regular massage. I had experienced a few before, but things changed when she worked on my legs. She gently adjusted my position, her hands gliding over my calves and moving up the back of my legs. The area felt sensitive, and I could sense the tension leaving my body. Then she continued with my back, moving with care and attention. "Roll over," she whispered. I did, feeling a bit exposed even though my robe covered me. She focused on rubbing my shoulders and arms, keeping everything warm and soothing. After finishing my back, she softly said, "I'll be right back." I wondered if that meant the end of the session. I felt completely relaxed, my back much better, but I still had a bit of tension left. I didn't have to worry. I heard the bathroom door open and looked up to see Melinda. I smiled, thinking how nice the experience had become. She walked over with a confident smile. I sat up, feeling ready for more. She gently said. "Just relax. This is part of your massage." I lay back down. When I reached out, she guided my hand back, taking away any worries. She gathered her robe and set it aside, focusing on making everything soothing. She used warm massage oil, and I felt the unique sensation of comfort wash over me. As she continued, I felt lost in the shared moments. It felt special, and warmth filled me. "Did you like that?" she asked with a smile. "Does your back feel better?" "Melinda," I said, "I've never felt better." "You just relax," she told me. "I'm making dinner. Do you have an apron?" "Sorry, no," I replied, watching her as she moved about. "I bet you wouldn't tell me even if you did," she playfully said. Despite everything, we had a great talk during dinner, sharing stories about our lives. She opened up about her father's health and some challenges her family faced. She also talked about Jean-Pierre and how he was struggling with work and child support. "You are just so different," she said. After dinner, I asked about her plans. She smiled and mentioned her mom was spending the night with the girls. It was clear the evening held more possibilities, and we moved to my bedroom to spend more time together. This time, I felt encouraged to take the lead, enjoying a deeper connection as we explored our companionship. We shared moments that felt warm and special, letting the night unfold naturally until we eventually drifted into sleep. The next morning was interesting as well. We were having deeper discussions than I had expected. Melinda was truly opening up to me. "When I was younger," she began, "it was all about having fun. I wanted to enjoy everything life had to offer. I should have paid more attention to my studies. Things were different back then. My dad was well and my family was happy. I craved excitement," she said. "That's probably why I was drawn to Jean-Pierre. He was exciting, a little rebellious. He was fun until he betrayed my trust. That's when I decided to end it," she shared. "But then, just as my dad got sick, he came back. I thought he had grown up. We started seeing each other again, and soon I found out I was expecting Esme. Not long after, we got married. I'm not sure Jean-Pierre ever fully understood what marriage meant. Even before I was expecting Francine, things were not good. When I realized he would never be the father the girls needed, I divorced him. It felt like he didn't truly care about our marriage. He continued to live his life without much thought for his responsibilities. "I guess that's one of the reasons I appreciate you so much. You are so much more mature," she told me, looking across the table. This felt serious. I reminded myself to take my time, but Melinda had shown me a side of her that fascinated me. Plus, I was starting to really like the girls. "Melinda," I said, "I like you too." She smiled and reached out to hold my hand. "And another thing," I added. She looked up at me. "You give amazing massages," I said with a grin. Despite my plan to take things slow, our bond was growing stronger. We met several times a week, often with Esme and Francine. Esme was slowly starting to open up to me, while Francine was full of energy. I found out that Jean-Pierre was supposed to visit the girls every Tuesday evening. Sometimes he came and sometimes he didn't. When he did, Melinda and I often had a chance for our own night out. One Tuesday night, we planned to walk to a local place called the Woodpecker. Jean-Pierre was supposed to pick up the girls at 6 p.m., and I arranged to meet Melinda at 6:30. When I arrived, I saw Jean-Pierre leaving without the girls. I walked up to their unit and noticed the door was slightly open. I knocked and went inside, finding Melinda in tears on the couch. The girls were nowhere in sight. "What happened?" I asked gently, wrapping my arm around her to comfort her while she spoke through her tears. It seemed Jean-Pierre had come in upset. Melinda had asked him about his overdue child support, and it led to a big argument. Eventually, he left. "Where are the girls?" I asked, and she shook her head. I checked down the hall in their room, but they weren't there. I looked in Melinda's room and then the bathroom. No girls. Finally, I thought I heard a noise. I went back to their room and opened the closet door. There, sitting in the dark, were Esme and Francine, each holding a stuffed animal. "Hey," I said as I carefully sat down with them. "What are you all doing?" I asked. Even Francine, who usually spoke a lot, was quiet. I could tell they were both feeling down. I noticed Francine had a white stuffed bunny, and Esme was holding a giraffe. "Who are these?" I asked them. Finally, Francine spoke up. "This is Mr. Jones," she said, showing her stuffed animal. "Esme's is Barney," she added. "When we want to feel safe, we take them and go into the closet," she told me. I understood. When there were loud arguments, it scared the girls. They looked for a quiet place away from their parents' troubles. Their stuffed animals made them feel better. I didn't know how long we stayed in the dark, safe closet, but eventually Francine fell asleep and Esme climbed onto my lap. I just held her, feeling calm, but worried about what was happening outside. At some point, Melinda came in. She made a soft sound, and I looked up to see her smiling sadly at us in the closet. The light from the hallway showed that she had been crying. I didn't know everything that was going on, but I did know one thing. Even with my own feelings and worries, I was deeply committed to this family, both for Melinda and for the girls. As time went on, we became closer. I was starting to feel like a part of their lives. Melinda and I still enjoyed many nights out together, and our connection continued to grow stronger. But the real bond was forming among the four of us as a family. I often asked the girls to join us on outings. Melinda noticed how close I was to the girls and sometimes joked about it. "I think you're only with me because of Esme and Francine," she would say with a smile. We would laugh, but I could sense a bit of jealousy in her voice. Most of the time, we all got along well. There was some awkwardness whenever Jean-Pierre was around, which seemed to be often. Sometimes he would miss a visit and it would upset the girls. But over time, they got used to it. It must have been fall that year. I remember that night clearly. We were at my place. The air was chilly, a sign that winter was coming to the Pacific Northwest. I had made a small fire in the fireplace. After enjoying a quiet moment together in the warm glow, we leaned against the couch, mostly silent, watching the dancing flames. "I really didn't think my life could change so much," Melinda began. "There were many times when I thought I made a mess of things. Having the girls so young, Jean-Pierre being such a bad father and husband, and dealing with my dad's illness while my mom took care of him. Those few hours every few weeks for girls' nights out were the only fun I had." I felt it wasn't the time for me to say anything. I stayed quiet. "But then," she said, gently holding my hand, "you came into my life. You've made my world so much brighter. I'm so much happier, and the girls are too. I just wish I had gotten to know you better in high school." I knew the reason, but kept it to myself. I also realized that my calm nature was different from the excitement Jean-Pierre had brought her. I felt happy that she cared for me, but I worried if my steadiness would be enough for her in the future. Suddenly, those worries faded away. "I know it's usually done the other way," she started, "but I'm not going to wait." Melinda looked at me with determination in her eyes. "Kevin Gerard, will you marry me?" she asked. I was taken aback. I stood up while Melinda sat on the floor, a blanket around her and a hopeful smile on her face. I had thought about this a lot, but we hadn't been together a full year. And then I thought about this wonderful woman and her two sweet girls. "You want to get married?" I asked, my face breaking into a smile. She nodded, looking serious. "Well, normally I'd be the one down on one knee with a ring," I said. She paused, then her face lit up. "How about this instead?" she suggested. "I'll find a way to convince you to say yes. We can get the rings later." I couldn't help but smile at her playful attitude. In that moment, I realized I was now engaged. We started to plan the wedding, though it was more low-key due to her father's illness and the fact that she had already had a big wedding once. This one would be smaller, but still special. After all, it was my wedding too. My mom moved to Idaho soon after I finished high school, and my family was small, without many uncles, cousins, or grandparents. But I had a good group of friends I wanted to invite. I thought about asking Alan to be my best man, and there were some other details I would help with, but most of the planning would be up to Melinda. We met with our insurance agent, actually Melinda's agent. We got a small and affordable life insurance policy for each other. We also combined our auto and home insurance. "One thing we need," Melinda said during the meeting, "is long-term disability insurance. Neither of us should have to face what my parents are going through. My dad's illness has really affected their savings. It's been hard on my mom." The agent said he would give us different options for this insurance. "It can be costly," our agent warned us. "I don't care," Melinda said, and we went ahead and got the coverage. Meanwhile, things at work seemed to be going well. I continued managing projects and found that I was good at sales. Our sales team often asked me to travel with them to train on our products and give presentations. I explained our products in detail, and my excitement for imported wood connected well with our clients. I was also invited to speak at a regional convention about responsible forest management for the future. Right before the wedding, I planned another trip to South America. I was excited to visit the Ticuna people and my good friend Mafi. I spent 2 days with the Ticuna, mostly with Mafi. When I arrived, he welcomed me with a warm hug, and many Ticuna smiled at me. "Kevin, you come," he said, leading me towards where the orphanage used to be. I was amazed by the changes since my last visit 2 years ago. There was a new building with separate areas for the orphans, much larger than the open space I remembered. They had built a small schoolhouse with help from Van Duzen and hired a teacher from a nearby town. It was clear that Mafi and the Ticuna were proud of their achievements, and they appreciated what I had done. I tried to explain that it wasn't just me, but they focused on thanking me. As Mafi and I walked through the village, he said, "With school, now children have a future. They choose their path. They learn to read and write. A young man named Keta," he pointed in a general direction. "He goes to university," he said slowly, beaming with pride. I was amazed that our small support could make such a big difference for this community. "We also teach Ticuna traditions," Mafi added. "It's important for young people to know the old ways." "Mafi," I asked, "can you show me some Ticuna traditions?" He paused, looking at me closely, his usual smile fading for a moment. But soon he smiled back, seeing that I was sincere. "Yes, Kevin, I will show you." As we walked away from the orphanage, I felt really impressed by all the changes that Ticuna had made. But one thing stayed the same: the joy and happiness of the children. Even with their difficulties, they laughed and played. Their positive outlook on life was truly inspiring. That afternoon, Mafi shared the Ticuna traditions with me. He showed me their decorative masks and explained how they were made. He also demonstrated their traditional fishing methods in the Amazon and its many rivers. Finally, he explained how they hunted. One method they didn't use much anymore was blow dart hunting. "We take," he said a word I didn't know, which I thought meant something like a liquid, "from kamba, frog, and put it on the dart." He showed me how to use the blow dart, and his shot hit a tree 20 yards away. He explained that the liquid from certain frogs could help catch larger animals. Later, I learned that the frog that made this liquid was called philobates. There was a real skill to blow dart hunting. I tried it, but it was difficult. Mafi laughed at my efforts, but by the end I could hit a tree about 5 yards away. He also taught me how to measure the right amount of the liquid to use based on the size of the animal. "What happens," I asked, "if you don't have enough on the dart for the animal?" "The animal not die," he said, The animal just sleep with eyes open. It seemed to put the animal in a still state without harming it. It was intriguing, I thought. The next day, I had to leave. I told Mafi and the Takuna that I would come back. More than anything, I was glad I could help them. When I returned, the wedding was only weeks away. There was always a list of things I needed to do after work. I still liked getting to the office early, but now with all my tasks, I was leaving most days right at 5 p.m. One big task was moving Melinda and the girls to my house. We decided to live together and give up Melinda's rented condo. My house was small, but bigger than the condo. Melinda and I would have the main bedroom upstairs, while Esme and Francine would share a room on the main floor. The wedding was a lot of fun, with around 60 to 70 people there. Melinda's dad was there in a wheelchair, and I could tell his health was not good. Still, everything else was nice, and it was an enjoyable event. There was one problem that came up a week before the wedding. We had planned a honeymoon in St. Martin in the Caribbean. Weeks earlier, Melinda had talked to John Pierre about taking care of the girls during that week. At first, he had agreed easily. When John Pierre first found out about my relationship with Melinda, he seemed almost happy about it. Maybe relieved would be a better word. Our meetings with John Pierre mostly happened because of his visiting schedule. In different circumstances, I might see him as an easygoing friend. He could be charming and funny. There were times when he came to pick up the girls at the condo, and we would talk while Melinda got them ready. A few times I offered him a drink while we waited, and he always said yes. But I also knew another side of John Pierre, mostly from what Melinda told me and my own short encounters with him. He seemed friendly and loved to make people smile. Yet I realized that under this surface he was quite self-centered and held some hidden anger and a strong need to compete. He felt like life owed him something. Sometimes that anger would come through in his polished manner. I saw glimpses of the real John Pierre, and sometimes they were aimed at me. I didn't need to be a therapist to understand why he felt that way about me. First, I had a stable job and good pay. Second, he probably thought I had taken his ex-wife, even though they had been separated long before I was in the picture. Lastly, he noticed the good relationship I was building with his daughters, which he might have thought made me a better role model. In his mind, it might have looked like this: Kevin 3, John Pierre 0. As I said, John Pierre was very competitive. With this in mind, I tried to be careful in all my interactions with Melinda's ex and the girl's father. Now, back to the honeymoon. On the Wednesday before the wedding, Melinda called me, clearly frustrated. I quickly understood her anger was aimed at John Pierre. "He says he can't take care of the girls next week," she told me, after sharing her thoughts about it. By then, I knew that the best thing I could do was listen. "He said he has a work obligation," she added, her frustration clear. "A work obligation. He sells used cars. He says he has to be out of town." We talked about other babysitting options, many of whom I thought were better than John Pierre, but Melinda didn't like any of them. I agreed. It didn't feel right to send the girls to a new place for a whole week while we were away. "I'm sure we can get credits for our travel," I reassured Melinda. "I'll handle it." "Don't let this spoil the wedding," I said to her. She promised it wouldn't, but she still felt upset as we ended the call. I was sure John Pierre had started this trouble on purpose. Instead of traveling to St. Martin, the four of us spent the week along the Oregon coast. Unlike the Caribbean, we didn't have to worry about sunblock at Cannon Beach, but we had a great time. We strolled on the beach, looked at sea creatures in the tide pools, played in the sand dunes, and hiked on the cliffs with views of the Pacific Ocean. After all the busy wedding activities and moving into my house, life continued on. I continued my job at Van Dusen while Melinda worked in real estate. The girls were now in school. Francine was in kindergarten and Esme was in second grade. The next few years felt like happy times for us. I worked hard and got more involved in the sales part of our business. Overall, things were going well. Melinda sold a house about once a month, even though she worked less, and she helped her father, who was not feeling well. The girls were doing great in school. Francine became one of the popular kids with her friendly personality. Esme, on the other hand, was more reserved and took her time making friends. It was hard to see Esme as a carefree child, so I tried to spend extra time with her. She had some trust issues with adult men, which I understood, but I aimed to be someone she could count on. Believe it or not, John Pierre began to visit more regularly and canceled less often. He seemed at ease in my home while Melinda got the girls ready. We had friendly conversations, and I often reminded myself that he was more than what I first thought. He truly had a charming side. One memorable day showed another side of him. Weeks before, he had surprised the girls with the news that he was taking them to the circus. Sitting in my living room, he talked excitedly about the elephants, lions, and amazing acts. Francine was bursting with excitement, practically jumping in her seat. Even Esme, who usually held back, looked genuinely happy. For the next few weeks, the circus was a big topic in our home. However, that week I caught a nasty cold, maybe even the flu. To avoid spreading my sickness and risking the girls missing the circus, I moved to the basement with a space heater and a cot. On the afternoon of the circus, I got a call from Melinda. "You won't believe this," she said. "Their father canceled on them." "What?" I didn't quite understand her through my foggy head. "He's not taking them to the circus," she explained. I checked the clock. It was after 2 p.m. Melinda was busy with a client for the next hour or so. I thought about how disappointed the girls would be. I tried to get my tired body moving. Sitting up was hard, but I figured out how to call the company that was running the circus. I found out there were still a few tickets left, but I had to go to the Tacoma Dome box office to get them. They wouldn't sell tickets over the phone. Even with good traffic, it could take about an hour to reach my house. I got dressed and, feeling cold, headed to my car. The weather was typical for that time. Heavy rain was falling. I turned on the heat to warm up and clear the foggy windows. Luckily, the traffic wasn't too bad, though I had seen worse. By the time I reached the Tacoma Dome, it was almost 3:30. I felt terrible and went to the ticket office. "I need 3 tickets for tonight's circus," I told the person at the desk, my voice a little rough. "We only have general admission in the top row for $20 each, or a few reserved seats close to the show for $140 each," the agent replied. "What's the difference?" I asked. She told me that the reserved seats were much closer to the performers. I decided to buy those. "I'll take 3 for the reserved seats," I said. On my drive home, I called Melinda. She had just picked the girls up from school. "The girls are upset," she told me. "And where are you? I thought you were sick." I explained that I had bought circus tickets and that she could take the girls after all. "Oh my gosh, Kevin," she said. "Did you really get out of bed, drove in the rain, and spend almost $500 on tickets just to make the girls happy?" "Well," I replied, "it wasn't completely like that." But then I started coughing. "I really appreciate you," she said. Later, I thought about how I wished that were true. A few weeks later, I joined Melinda and her friends for a girls' night out, acting as Melinda's designated driver. I had a drink with them and chatted with Taylor. She seemed to be doing well, but her older sister, Janice, was struggling. I remembered Janice as older and attractive, but not quite as much as Taylor. Janice had 3 kids from 2 different men, but neither man was in the picture anymore. Taylor told me Janice was looking for a job. "Do you know anyone who is hiring?" she asked. "I know Janice can be a little forgetful, but she works hard." "She really needs something steady," Taylor added, clearly worried about her sister. "Actually, we needed a receptionist at the Crescent Creek office." I hesitated to recommend her. It felt a bit like setting someone up on a blind date. There could be a lot of problems, but also a chance for something good. Still, Taylor had been a good friend for a long time. "Taylor," I said, "we might have a job for her. I'll look into it." "Kevin, thank you," she said with a grin and gave me a quick hug. On the way home, Melinda brought it up. "What was with Taylor being so warm with you?" she asked, sounding a bit curious and protective. I explained the situation. "Okay, I guess," Melinda replied. I felt somewhat pleased that she was looking out for me. A few weeks later, we actually hired Janice. I was hopeful that Melinda could handle the basic tasks of being a receptionist. As the months went by, life followed a steady routine. Nothing too exciting happened, but we also avoided any big problems. I felt comfortable with this way of living. I continued to do well at my job, and my efforts were rewarded with a raise. Melinda started talking about getting a bigger house. Just as we expected, home prices had gone up. I knew we could sell my house for a good price and buy something larger. This was Melinda's idea. I had a more cautious plan. I wanted to save money for our daughter's college while we stayed in my house. Melinda agreed to this plan for now, but she didn't seem very enthusiastic. Over the next year, several important things happened. The first was the passing of Melinda's father. One night, we received a call from her mother. I listened as Melinda spoke. She didn't break down or cry immediately. I think we had all been slowly grieving his declining health for a while. I could also tell that I wasn't the only one feeling mixed emotions about the news. After the busy days following a loved one's passing, we all needed time to adjust to what life would be like moving forward. Melinda seemed to keep her feelings to herself. There was a noticeable distance between us, and I noticed she was somewhat distant with the girls, too. I thought this was her way of dealing with her grief, and I hoped we would reconnect after some time. I also noticed a new tension between the girls. While sibling disagreements are normal, especially with their different personalities, Francine was the lively younger sister, and Esme was quieter, they had always been close. Now, that closeness seemed to be changing. Then there was Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre had tried out various jobs over time. He was charming and had a friendly personality, but he often lacked the commitment needed for his work. He would start strong but soon reveal his true nature. His inconsistent job history would discourage most employers from hiring him unless they were in a tough spot. However, he seemed to have found his niche in selling cars. Perhaps he had changed, or maybe his new situation suited him better. He was now working at Register's pre-owned luxury vehicles, focusing on high-end used European and Japanese cars. Jean-Pierre's good looks and confident nature helped him connect with customers looking for luxury vehicles, and he seemed to be doing well. So I was surprised to see a black Land Rover parked outside my house with Jean-Pierre inside waiting for the girls. The last time I saw him, he was driving an older Honda Civic. I also noticed that he had taken one of my beers and some fancy smoked salmon I had bought. "Hey, man," he said happily. "When I saw the salmon, I just had to try it," he added while he finished his snack. I just nodded, choosing not to say anything. It had been a rough day at work, and I was already feeling down. Having Jean-Pierre in my house, drinking my beer and eating my food didn't help at all. After he left, I talked to Melinda, who usually had a lot to say about Jean-Pierre. I thought she would understand how I felt, but her answer shocked me. "Kevin," she said, "who cares? It's just food. We can get more." After years of marriage, I knew that I could argue and still risk our relationship. I didn't want to start a fight. I already had enough stress from work. "Okay," I replied, hoping to keep things calm. I dropped the subject, but I couldn't shake off how defensive she seemed about him. I thought about our relationship and realized that since her father passed away, we hadn't really reconnected. The next day at work, rumors started spreading in the office. The economy had slowed down and fewer new houses were being sold. We had initially expected some growth this year in our budgets. When creating a budget, it's supposed to be a careful guess of what business will be like over a set period. But there was always pressure to show an increase. I remembered my original numbers showed little growth, but I was told to change them to show a rise. So I did. Once all budgets were in, upper management planned based on those numbers. They hired people, bought equipment, and built up inventory, all based on these guesses. But as the economy slowed, it affected profits. This made the shareholders uneasy. Upper management had to find ways to increase profits, even with slow sales. Usually that meant cutting costs. That's where the rumors came from. What were they planning to do? At home, outside stresses started to affect our usually happy life. Melinda's real estate sales dropped a lot, which made her more tense. I was on edge, worrying about the rumors at work. And to make it worse, the girls were arguing. "I want my own room," Esme said. "I don't want to share with Francine anymore." This led Melinda to mention a larger house she had seen and how great it would be. With all the uncertainty in the economy, buying a more expensive house was the last thing we needed. When I brought this up, it was clear who was seen as the bad guy. Esme walked away, clearly troubled. The next day at work, I looked at my sales numbers. Most of my products remained steady or saw a small increase, except for the lumber I bought from the Tacuna. Sales of that tropical hardwood were up 18%. I quickly realized why. Premium products were not usually used in new housing projects. This wood was often bought for custom homes and renovations. This part of the market didn't change as much as new home building. This knowledge lifted my spirits a bit. That afternoon, I received more news from the company. Jack Valentine, my mentor and supporter, was retiring early. He had accepted an offer to leave. Several other experienced managers were doing the same. Then I heard more concerning news. Charlie Flanagan was moving up to the vice president position that Jack held. I had never gotten along well with Flanagan, and I felt he didn't want me there either. I decided to keep my head down and just focus on my work. For a while, that approach worked. Over the next few months, an announcement came about a RIF, which means they were going to lay people off. I didn't worry too much about my job, but I felt bad for those who might be affected. That Thursday, I was called to meet with Charlie Flanagan at the corporate office. I felt a little nervous but confident in my numbers as I entered the building. Flanagan made me wait 10 minutes before inviting me into Jack's former office, now his. "Kevin," Flanagan greeted me with a firm handshake and a forced smile. "Have you ever been around someone who seems fake while trying to act friendly?" That was how I felt. I much preferred being around people who were honest, even if they were a bit gruff. "As you know," he started, "we need to make some changes in the business." "Oh no, am I getting fired?" I started to worry. "Kevin," he said with another fake smile. He must have noticed my anxiousness. "Don't worry, you're part of the family here," he said, opening his arms as if to welcome me. "But we are going to need to change some things." He spoke more seriously. We talked about a few minor issues that didn't interest me much, but then he dropped a big announcement. "That 5% we are donating to the Indian tribe in Brazil, that's ending." He told me. I tried to convince him how much it had helped the community. I mentioned that it would ensure we had a steady supply of lumber for years. "Years? The only thing I'm worried about is next quarter," he laughed harshly. Finally, I told him that sales of the tropical hardwood were up 18%, and we didn't need to make this cut because the business was handling the costs. "Up 18%, that's good," he replied. "Now we're going to add 5 more points to the total. I like it," he said. "Charlie," I replied, "I need to meet with them in person to explain what we are doing." He looked at me for a long time, and his cheerful facade faded away. His true feelings showed through. "Okay," he reluctantly agreed, "but make it quick and do it soon." And with that, the meeting ended. That night at home, I felt a heavy weight on my shoulders. The pride I had felt from helping Mafi and his group was gone. I was going to have to face a friend and let them down, and I dreaded it. For the first time, I started to question my future at Van Duzen. Home felt tense. The girls were arguing about different things. Melinda was not in a bad mood, but we no longer had the closeness we used to share. There was negativity in the air. After another night of disagreements, I suddenly had an idea. Most of the basement was unfinished. There was a laundry area and some storage, but I could create a small room in one corner. There were windows, so it could be a proper bedroom. "Esme," I called, "I want to talk to you about something." "What?" she replied with a sigh. "How about I build you a new room?" I said with excitement. "In the basement." "She's not sleeping in the dusty old basement," Melinda interrupted. I ignored Melinda and told Esme she could help design it and pick any color she liked. All 4 of us went downstairs, and I showed her my idea. I could see a spark of excitement in Esme about having her own new room. "How would you do it?" Melinda asked. I explained how I would frame the walls, add a wall heater, put in a nice floor, and install a door. I was grateful for everything I learned while working for Jim Buehler. For the first time in a while, everyone seemed happy. Esme talked about colors for the room, where the closet would go, and asked other questions about her space. For a moment, Francine seemed a little left out. She was used to being the center of attention. "I want a room in the basement too," she shouted, and we all laughed. That night felt positive. Despite the recent troubles, there were some bright moments. Melinda was more loving and the girls weren't fighting. However, I couldn't forget the problems at work. Ryan, one of the new trainees, was let go during the staff reduction. I liked Ryan and valued his hard work. He was new to the lumber business but was learning quickly. Before he left, he came to my office to thank me, give me his contact details, and shake my hand. One thing I had been putting off but knew I had to do was return to Brazil and speak to Mafi and the Takuna about the changes in our plans. I had some tough news to share. I started to think about whether I could import lumber myself and start a small business. I knew I could still work with Mafi, and I felt sure he would want to team up with me. I looked into small business loans and set up a meeting with the Small Business Administration later that week. In my free time, I started planning my business. When I got home on Tuesday, John Pierre was there. This was unusual since he often canceled seeing the girls on his regular day. Maybe his job was helping him grow up, I thought. As I walked in, I saw a cozy scene. Melinda and Francine were sitting at the kitchen table chatting with John Pierre, who was enjoying one of my beers. Melinda was laughing at something he had said. "Kevin," John Pierre said with a smile, "come sit down with us." He pointed to one of the beers. He acted like I was a guest in my own home, sitting with my wife and enjoying my drinks. I just nodded to everyone and went upstairs to change my clothes. From my bedroom, I could hear their lively conversation. The whole situation upset me. I knew if I talked to Melinda about it, things might get awkward. Even though having John Pierre more involved with the girls was good, I still wasn't sure I trusted him completely. While I had no reason to doubt Melinda, I felt a few cracks forming in our relationship. A week later, I was on a flight to Brazil. While in the air, I thought about how to talk to Mafi and the Takuna people about the new financial situation. I wondered how they would react. I also kept thinking about starting my own business. Could it be successful? Would I be able to make money? These were some of the questions I wrestled with while flying through the night sky. When I arrived at Mafi's village, it felt like a celebration. Music filled the air, some people wore masks, and the smell of tasty food greeted me. This added to my worry about the situation. After warm hugs, we sat in a big dining area with plenty of food and drinks. "Kevin, my good friend," Mafi said. "How are you?" I couldn't match Mafi's happy smile and had to look away. I felt like I had let these wonderful people down. The progress they had made in their village with the orphanage and school weighed heavily on my mind. I wondered if they would have to stop paying their teacher. These thoughts raced through my head as I thought about how to share the news. "Kevin," Mafi said, looking closely at me, "I see something's bothering you." "Tell me," Mafi said eagerly. I took a deep breath and tried to explain the problems we were facing with money, the slowdown in building new homes, and the drop in stock values. Eventually, I shared how my company needed to change the way it handled finances, something that had worked well for a long time. "Kevin," Mafi replied, his smile fading, "you don't decide this. The big company does?" "Yes," I nodded. He then said he needed to talk to some other people and suggested I take a walk to the orphanage. I found a spot on a stump on a little hill, looking down at the orphanage while thinking about my issues. Work was tough and seemed to be getting tougher. My relationship with Melinda wasn't going well, the girls didn't seem as cheerful, and I was worried about John Pierre, who might continue to be part of our lives. As I thought about all of this, my mood grew darker. But then, like a light bulb moment, I started to listen. Around me were children who had very little, not even parents. Yet they were laughing, happy, and playing. I saw a little girl, maybe 5 years old, singing and clapping her hands, wearing tattered clothes, just happy to be alive. I realized how small my problems were compared to theirs. In that moment, I understood what I needed to do. I had never been afraid of hard work and believed in my abilities. The only thing stopping me was the comfort of staying at Van Duzen. I hesitated because I was worried about leaving my comfort zone. Yet here I was, concerned about my life while these kids had so little. With renewed determination, I went to find Mafi to share my plans. He met me halfway up the trail, his big smile back. It seemed Mafi and the other Takuna felt similarly without knowing all the details. "Kevin," he said, "you buy lumber from Takuna. You sell it, then pay us." This could really work out well. From my business classes in college, I remembered that cash flow is a big issue for new small businesses. If I could pay them after selling the lumber, it would really help with the cash flow problem. We talked deep into the night about all the details of our new plan. The rebate from Van Duzen would end in 90 days, giving me 3 months to get my business started. I already had good news from the SBA about getting a loan, and I could use my 401k savings. I also had some personal savings. I would have enough money to start. When I got home that Thursday night, I was excited to share my plan with Melinda. Thankfully, the girls were calm, and I had some good time to talk to her. I was excited to share my business plans and my arrangement with the Takuna, but Melinda didn't seem as thrilled. "You mean you might not have a steady paycheck?" she asked. I started to go over the profits I hoped to make from the hardwood before taking on more work. She looked at me without much interest, not showing support for my ideas. "Okay, I guess," she said, sounding unsure. "Just try to leave on good terms so they might want you back if this doesn't work out." Her response bothered me. I understood her worries, especially since she had dealt with some unstable months of income before we got together. I knew a big part of why she liked me at first was my reliability. Still, I felt let down that she didn't seem to believe in my abilities. Over the next 3 months, I worked hard to create my small business. I found a warehouse to rent, confirmed my deal with the Takuna and Mafii, and wrote a business plan that I submitted to the SBA. I got approved for a low-interest loan. There were many details to handle, but I was amazed at how well things were going. One challenge was hiring staff. I knew I needed someone for the office and another for the warehouse. Luckily, the company Van Dusen was downsizing, which helped me find people. I hired Janice Pilkington, Taylor's sister. She made up for her lack of experience with her dedication, and I also brought on Albert Ramos to manage the warehouse and shipping. I made one more hire, Ryan Christensen. He had been let go early on during the downsizing. I was hopeful about his potential as a sales coordinator. Without sales, our business couldn't grow. When I asked Ryan to join me, he was excited. He had just gotten married and was about to be a father. "Thank you, Kevin," Ryan said after I made the offer. "I promise I won't let you down." As I approached the final weeks before launching my business, I met with Charlie Flanagan. I had scheduled a meeting with him at his office, giving no other details. "So, what's up?" Flanagan asked. There were no friendly smiles this time. "Charlie," I began, "I'm giving my 2-week notice." I handed him my resignation letter. "My last day will be February 24th. He just stared at me, trying to understand what this meant. "So what will you do?" he asked, showing no kindness at all. His true feelings showed. I explained a bit that I was going to try something new on my own, but didn't share all the details. Before he could bring up company rules or agreements, I quickly addressed it. "I've talked to HR and legal," I said. "What I'm doing doesn't go against any company policies." I noticed his face get red. He was clearly angry. Flanagan liked to be in control. I could see he was trying to figure out how to ruin my plans, but there was no way for him to do that. "Okay," he said without much care. "You are probably going to lose your job anyway. This will just save me from paying you." With that, he turned back to his computer. At home, things were still a bit tricky, but at least they weren't worse. I was spending less time at home because I was busy setting up the office and warehouse after normal hours. I usually got home around 7 o'clock and left again early in the morning. I knew Melinda and I would need to talk soon to mend our relationship, but with the excitement of building my business, I pushed that aside for a little while. I was also working on Esme's new room. It was almost finished. I just needed to put up the trim, hang a closet rod, and paint it. I told Esme we could paint it together this weekend. "You and I can go to the paint store Saturday morning," I said, "and you can pick out the color." She seemed happy about that. That Saturday, Melinda and Francine were out shopping, so it was just Esme and me in her new room. We were painting it a soft yellow called Summer Sunrise. It felt nice to be together in the quiet, each of us working on our own sections. Although Esme was usually quiet, we had a good bond and often talked. That morning, however, she seemed extra quiet. I could tell something was on her mind. "Everything okay, Es?" I asked while applying more paint. At first, I wasn't sure if she heard me. She didn't answer. I looked over at her, and her expression showed she was deep in thought. "Esme?" I asked again. After a moment, she spoke. "I don't like my dad," she said. "What?" I had noticed him around more often and hoped that meant he was getting better, which would be good for the girls. My main concern was for the girls. I never fully trusted Jean-Pierre, especially since he would drink my beer and take our food without asking. I could tolerate it as long as he treated the girls well. "Why?" I asked. "What's bothering you?" She took a few moments, searching for the right words. She began to share that he said things she didn't think were true about me. He made jokes that were hurtful and talked about their mom as if there was a chance they might get back together. This confused Francine, who seemed to start believing him. "I don't believe what he says to us," Esme said. "Parents have a strong influence on their kids. From a young age, children look up to their parents for guidance. When a child starts to doubt what a parent says, it can really confuse them. Their world is changing. For the child, this can cause feelings of doubt." I asked Esme what things Jean-Pierre was saying. I felt uneasy about his comments towards me, but I was more worried about how he was trying to shake up our family. I knew this was something Melinda and I needed to tackle together. Later that evening, when the girls were busy, I told Melinda about my talk with Esme. "Oh, I know Jean-Pierre says things sometimes. I don't think it's a big deal," she said. "Melinda," I replied, surprised at her calm reply, "if he's trying to create problems for us, then it is important. You can talk to him or I will." "Fine," she said, now a bit annoyed. "I'll talk to him on Tuesday." "Mel, I just want to make things stable for the girls," I said, reaching out to her. She didn't move away, but she also didn't show any warmth. Once we sorted this out, I was determined to put more effort back into our relationship. The good news was that right from the start, the business started to do well. Part of that success came from my good friend Alan Church at McLean's Lumber. He quickly offered his support. I had to keep prices fair and offer good service, but he gave us a great chance to succeed. Another lucky break came in our third month. I received a call from Jack Valentine, my old mentor from Van Duzen. After leaving Van Duzen, he had invested in a small mill that made custom timbers. After some friendly chatting, he got to the point. "I'm looking for a new distributor. Are you interested?" Jack asked. I knew I would need more options besides the hardwoods from Brazil. Specialty timbers could work well for us. I told Jack I was very interested, and we set a date to meet. Compared to the big business at Van Duzen, we were quite small, but I heard from others that Charlie Flanagan was not happy about our success. So far, we hadn't faced any direct trouble, but I knew it could happen in the future. Meanwhile, business was still going well. By May, our third month, we were already making a profit. I was traveling along the West Coast, setting up dealers in major markets. This travel put a strain on our marriage. If I had taken a moment to think about it, I might have gained a better understanding of our marriage's state. But I was focused on my new business. I believed our relationship was strong enough to handle this temporary challenge. At first, Melinda was upset with my schedule and travel. I tried to help her see how this would help us later. I was building something important, and her worries made me uneasy. Eventually, things began to get a bit better. We hadn't quite returned to the strong bond we once had, but Melinda's complaints about my schedule seemed to fade away. I thought this was a good sign at the time. Looking back, I should have worried more. Jean-Pierre started to spend more time around my kids and our family. When he visited, he acted like an old friend, casually knocking twice and then coming in if the door was unlocked, helping himself to snacks. If I didn't know him well, I might have actually liked him. He had a charm that made him popular at the car lot, but I knew it was just a show. Sometimes I caught glimpses of his real self. He could be jealous and competitive, especially around the girls. Francine seemed affected by this. I had nearly given up trying to talk to Melinda about my concerns because she was less open to my point of view. Where I thought we were partners facing challenges together, it often felt like Melinda was against me. I remained hopeful about fixing our relationship. I just needed to make sure the business was working well first. We were on the right track, and I was optimistic that all my efforts, including travel and long hours, would lead to success. I also felt responsible for my small team, which included 4 people. Janice, Taylor's older sister, a single mom with 3 kids, Ryan, a former trainee with a wife expecting their first child, and Albert, who I knew little about but remembered had many photos of his children at his desk. These people worked hard with me to build our business and reach our goals. I understood they often sacrificed for the company, and I appreciated their efforts. I felt a duty to my employees and all the hard work they put in. As we moved into the fall of our first year, it felt like I could finally breathe a little easier. Business was good, and our sales were steadily increasing. People enjoyed working with us, and we had added a couple of new product lines, which was great. With my spirits high, I decided to call Melinda. It was a Tuesday, and I knew the kids were usually with Jean-Pierre then. I suggested we go out for dinner. "Tonight?" Melinda replied. I'm not sure. It's been a long day." Not the excitement I wanted, but she didn't say no. "Come on, Mel," I said. "When's the last time we went out? Just us?" She took a moment to think. "Okay," she finally said. Not the strongest yes, but I felt sure that once we were together, we'd have a good time. That Tuesday night, Jean-Pierre walked into my house casually. He grabbed a drink and sat at the kitchen table, waiting for the kids to join us. He seemed relaxed, smiling and chatting with me like we were old friends. A little while later, Melinda came down the stairs looking nice with a touch of makeup for our dinner. She looked lovely, and Jean-Pierre noticed. "Wow," he said. "Melinda, you look amazing." He complimented her. "Are you heading out?" he asked. "Yes, Kevin and I are going to get something to eat," she replied. "You are?" Jean-Pierre asked, his curiosity clear. I watched as Jean-Pierre's smile seemed to fade. Melinda avoided his gaze and looked a bit uncomfortable about our plans. The moment felt strange, and it made me uneasy. Later, at dinner, I thought about whether I should bring up Jean-Pierre. Part of me needed to figure out what was going on. The mood earlier had felt off, but we were enjoying our time, one of the best evenings we'd had in a while. I knew that if I said the wrong thing, it might ruin everything. I decided to keep quiet for now and pay close attention. If needed, I could talk about it later. The next week, I left on a business trip to California on Sunday, planning to return Wednesday. Fortunately, I finished my work by Tuesday afternoon, so I went to the airport for my 3:40 flight, landing at SeaTac around 6. I arrived early at the gate and spent an hour chatting with my friend Alan, covering a mix of work and personal news. Just before we were set to board, my phone died. I remembered I had packed my charger in my checked bag. I thought I would surprise Melinda and the girls by being home tonight instead of tomorrow. By the time I got home that Tuesday night, it was dark. My house lights were on as I pulled into the driveway. You may have heard stories about a businessman coming home early to a surprising scene. In some ways, I might have preferred that, but that wasn't what happened. When I opened the door, I saw pizza on the kitchen table, music playing, and laughter coming from Francine and Jean-Pierre. It felt like a family gathering, and I suddenly felt out of place. They were having a great time in my home. All their eyes turned to me in surprise as I stepped in with my suitcase. Melinda looked surprised, a hint of guilt on her face. Esme just stared at me, a bit of sadness in her eyes. Francine didn't miss a beat, barely acknowledging me. Jean-Pierre, however, stayed calm and welcoming as if he were the host. "Kevin," he said with a smile, "welcome. Can I get you something to drink?" He acted like this was his home and I was the guest. He opened the refrigerator. "We're out of beer," he said. "Kevin," Melinda interrupted, "I didn't think you'd be home until Wednesday. It's girls' night with Jean-Pierre and they brought pizza." She explained. It made sense, but something felt off. Jean-Pierre was acting like he belonged here and Melinda seemed too comfortable with everything going on. "Yeah," I replied. "I finished my work early." I started going upstairs to the bedroom. As I put away my clothes and unpacked, I heard Jean-Pierre say something, followed by Francine laughing. A few minutes later, Melinda came into the bedroom. "How was your trip?" she asked, but she didn't seem very interested in the details. I stayed quiet, thinking about how the evening was going. Finally, I looked at Melinda. "Melinda," I said, "it was fine. Why don't you go back downstairs and join the girls? I've had a long few days." I was trying to push her away. She hesitated before leaving. "You seem upset about something," she said. "Yeah, I guess so," I responded a bit louder than I meant to. More softly, I added, "I come home to find my family, including you, laughing and having fun in our house. And there's Jean-Pierre, who has let those girls down so many times. It feels like he's acting like he owns our fridge." I probably said more than I should have, but I was tired, and Jean-Pierre's presence was bothering me. "You're making a big fuss over nothing," she replied. "Jean-Pierre is trying to do better, and it's important for him to be in their lives. After all, he is their father." She wanted to make sure I understood that. Her words hurt. I cared for those girls and always tried to be there for them. I couldn't count how many times Jean-Pierre had disappointed them. I felt like I had been more of a father to them than he ever was. "Okay," I said. "I get it." Then I fell quiet. She watched me unpack for a moment before leaving without saying anything more. This was a sign that our already distant relationship was slipping further away. I felt it even from Francine sometimes. Esme was different, though. We grew closer. She seemed to see through her father's act, but my connection with Melinda was clearly falling apart. Looking back, I see that two main things influenced everything that happened then. First, it was Jean-Pierre, especially the feelings Melinda had for him. She knew he was careless, untrustworthy, and only thought about himself. but the charm of the bad boy seemed more appealing than the steady comfort she had with me. Then, there was my job, and what happened in early January. I was busy focusing on my small team and making sure our business thrived. Later, I thought that if I had still been with Van Duzen, I might have had more time for my marriage, and maybe things would have turned out differently. What happened was a noticeable lack of closeness, even though we never talked about our problems. Our once strong bond faded to very few moments of connection when we could. Then came the phone call in January. Despite the troubles at home, our business had done well in its first year, with hopes for even better results in the second. My team worked well together, and I valued all the hard work, long hours, and sacrifices they made. Nearly half of our business came from McLean's Lumber, thanks to my friendship with Alan Church. I made sure McLean's got good deals, and in return, he kept the orders coming. But I also knew that depending too much on one customer could be risky. Any disruption could lead to big problems. And then it happened. I was at the office when I saw an incoming call from Alan Church. "Hey, buddy, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. "Man, this is really hard," he replied. Right away, my good mood faded. I could tell something was wrong just from his voice. Apparently, Van Duzen had offered McLean's a surprising deal for the year on tropical hardwoods. They had gone straight to Alan's boss. "What price are they quoting you?" I asked, hoping we could match it. When he told me the price, it was lower than what I could offer. I knew then that this was a serious challenge. "Kevin, I'm really sorry," Alan said. "I tried. I talked about your quality and how well you served them. It didn't matter. My bosses said we had to be competitive with pricing," he explained. I thanked him, and soon after we hung up, I sat there calculating our numbers, sales, costs, and cash reserves. Losing the McLean's business would be a big blow. I figured we might be out of business in 3 months, maybe 4. I needed to act. I called the staff together. That wasn't hard since there were only 3 of them. I explained the news and told them I was working on a plan. The truth I didn't share was that I had no idea what the plan was. I told them if anyone wanted to leave and find a new job, I would understand completely. They just sat there looking at me. In shock, I suppose, there was silence for a moment. Finally, Albert broke the quiet. "Boss," he started, "are we still getting paid this week?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, everyone will be paid," I replied. "But if you find other jobs, please feel free to explore them." As I looked at the 3 of them, I wondered how I would manage to pay them like I had just promised. At that moment, I had no idea. "Kevin," Ryan interrupted my worrying thoughts, "I'm not going anywhere. If we all work hard together, we can get through this," he said. "I'm with Ryan," Janice Pilkington added. Albert nodded in agreement. "Okay, thank you all," I said. "I will come up with a plan and keep everyone updated." I felt grateful for my employees' loyalty, but the weight of responsibility felt heavy. Janice was a single mom of 3, Ryan had a newborn, and I knew Albert also had a family. That was a lot to think about, and I had my own family to care for, too. When I shared the news at home, the reaction was not nearly as positive as it had been with my team. I asked everyone to sit at the kitchen table. We needed to discuss something important. I explained the situation about my business and how things were going to be tight for a while. "What do you mean by tight?" Melinda asked, arms crossed. "We'll need to keep an eye on our spending, cut back a bit, and be careful," I explained to Melinda and the girls. "My birthday's next month, and you promised me a phone," Francine said. "Esme got a phone when she was my age," she added. "We'll see," was all I could say for now. Francine was upset and made it known. Melinda was upset but stayed quiet. Only Esme seemed to understand. The family meeting broke apart with Francine slamming the door and Melinda walking away. I sat in quiet thought, trying to figure out the best options for my business and family. I was surprised when Esme, who usually didn't say much, showed a gesture of support. "Thanks, Es," I said. I appreciated her kindness. It meant she understood and was on my side. That night I stayed up late, going over our finances and the business's money situation. I knew cash flow would be a challenge. We had products, but I needed money to keep things running. One idea I had was to take on some construction work on the side. In our neighborhood, there always seemed to be someone needing a fence, new siding, or a deck. If I could work on weekends, I thought it might help cover our home expenses. Then more bad news came on Monday. More of our customers had started using the Van Dusen product, and our sales were at risk of dropping even more. I hit the road, and throughout the week, I managed to secure a few new clients and keep some of our existing business intact. Not enough, but it helped. I settled into a routine where I spent my days selling in the field and my evenings at the office, taking care of all the other tasks needed to keep the business running. On the weekends, I picked up a side job building a fence for a neighbor a couple of streets away. This would bring in some extra cash for living expenses, while all the business income went towards paying employees and other bills. Deep down, I knew this wouldn't be enough. Over the next month, business was down by 40% from what I had planned. This wasn't sustainable. My savings were running out too quickly. I noticed that Van Dusen products were everywhere. Their materials weren't as good as ours, but they were cheaper. I kept working day and night. At home, things were getting tougher. I was hardly there. When I was home, I faced a lot of questions about money, our finances, and bills. I started sleeping at the office several nights a week. I had a trip to Brazil scheduled soon, one I had paid for back when money was less of a worry. I was set to leave in about 30 days. No matter how much I was needed here, I still needed to go to Brazil. Something seemed off with Melinda, and I had a feeling it was connected to Jean-Pierre. Not long ago, even with the growing distance between us, we would talk. It wasn't always good, but at least we knew what was happening in each other's lives. Most of our chats were about the girls, their little successes, their challenges, and the everyday talks parents have about their kids. Now, our conversations had almost stopped. A lot of that was my fault. I was so focused on keeping the business alive that I didn't notice what was happening in our marriage until we barely talked anymore. One topic we always agreed on was Jean-Pierre. We would discuss his shortcomings as a parent and how we could best support the girls emotionally. I started to notice that during our rare talks, when I mentioned Jean-Pierre, Melinda no longer joined in. One conversation made it clear just how much had changed. "Is Jean-Pierre getting the girls tomorrow night?" I asked. "Yes," was her short answer. "Wow," I said. "This could be a record. 4 weeks in a row without him canceling on the girls." I was half joking. "Well, he's been around a lot more than you have lately," she shot back. "Mel," I said, "I'm trying to save my business. I'm doing this for you and the girls. You know that." I felt my frustration growing. "You and that business," she said. "Why don't you get a regular job and bring home a steady paycheck?" I looked at her surprised. She understood how much my job meant to me, but she suggested that I had let the family down with money. I was working long hours every day of the week. I was feeling worn out, physically, mentally, and emotionally. I kept quiet, knowing that speaking up might make things worse. She thought my silence showed weakness and added one more comment. "At least Jean-Pierre has a steady job," she said. I couldn't hold back my frustration anymore. "This is hard to believe," I responded, feeling both angry and hurt. I quickly stood up, grabbed my things, and headed to my office, glancing back at her to see her looking very upset. In my office, I thought about the challenges in my life, my marriage, and my business. I had put so much energy into work, thinking it was what mattered most. I believed Melinda would understand my long hours, but maybe I had been too hopeful. I decided it was time to focus on my marriage. I would start that tomorrow. It was best for both of us to take a break tonight. I spent the rest of the evening working. A few days later, I used some of my savings to buy flowers for Melinda as a sign of peace. When I got home, I was surprised to find my mother-in-law and the girls watching TV, but Melinda was not there. "Hi, Dad," said Esme, while Francine just waved at me, not taking her eyes off the screen. Esme had started calling me Dad. Sometimes, so did Francine. "Hello, Kevin," my mother-in-law greeted me. "Where's Melinda?" I asked. She told me Melinda was out with friends but acted a bit strange and didn't look me in the eye. Was she hiding something? I asked her for more details about the friends, but she said she didn't know. Something felt off. Then I asked another question. "Why aren't the girls with Jean-Pierre?" I inquired. My mother-in-law was an attractive woman, even at her age, but she didn't seem to be very sharp. This showed when she began to answer my question about the girls and Jean-Pierre. They saw him before they left, she said, not realizing she had shared too much. Before who left? I asked, already fearing the answer. Jean-Pierre and Mel. She suddenly stopped, realizing she revealed something she shouldn't have. I tried to ask her more, but she clammed up. I told her that now that I was home, she could go. I would stay with the girls. She hesitated at first, but quickly agreed to leave. It turned out to be a nice evening just with the girls. I thought about how much I liked spending time with them. I tried not to worry too much about what this meant for the future. Eventually, I got the girls to bed and waited. It was after 10 o'clock when I heard a car pull up. The headlights shone on the living room ceiling. I heard the car shut off, and for a few moments nothing happened. I figured they noticed my car and were deciding what to do next. As she walked into the house, she looked uneasy. I felt drained. I had been working extra hours on my business and trying to manage our household money. The stress was overwhelming, and now I had a troubling feeling that my wife might not be truthful with me. She stared at me with a worried expression as she stepped inside. "How was your evening?" I asked, trying to sound calm, even though my insides were churning. "Fine," she replied with a single word. "I was surprised to see your mother here," I noted, curious about how she would respond. "She wanted to spend time with the girls," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Isn't it Jean-Pierre's turn to be with the girls on Tuesday?" I asked, fully aware it was. "He had something else to do," she answered, the tension thick in the air. "Oh, and what was that?" I asked, pretending to be casual. "I don't know," she said, looking caught off guard. "I'm tired. I'm going upstairs." I watched her walk up the stairs. Everything in my life felt fragile, and now it seemed to shift again. This change felt heavy. To sum it up, my business was struggling, and I had people counting on me. I promised to take care of them, and they trusted me. My marriage, which I had hoped to fix after getting my business sorted, now felt like it was in serious trouble. I wasn't sure how deep the trouble ran, but I was starting to get a sense of it. Then there were the girls. Even though I never said it out loud, I felt responsible for them. Jean-Pierre was their biological father, but they needed more than someone focused on themselves. I always intended to support them, and now I worried about being able to do that. These thoughts swirled in my mind as I drove to my office that night. Sleep was hard to find, and I ended up working late into the night. In the weeks that followed, it felt like I was underwater. I worked nonstop, rarely taking a break. When I was home, things between Melinda and me were tense and unwelcoming. I hadn't confronted her about Jean-Pierre yet. Let me be clear, I was not accepting their relationship. But as I planned my next steps, I worried that a confrontation might harm my bond with the girls. I knew I needed a strategy, but so far I hadn't figured one out. Still, I was hopeful that I would. The one piece of good news was that my business seemed to be leveling off. We were still far from my goals, but it felt like we had hit a bottom and could start to recover. As I got ready for my trip to Brazil, I hoped I could pay my workers for a couple more months, maybe 3. When I left home that morning, it was not very warm. Melinda didn't even say goodbye. I got a hug from Esme and a quick, "Bye, Dad," from Francine, and that was all. As I walked to my car, Esme suddenly appeared. "Hey, Ez, what's up? You already said goodbye to me," I said with a smile. "Dad?" she started. I liked when she called me that. "I'm scared to tell you something," she said. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked gently. She paused for a moment and then continued. She told me that when I wasn't home, Jean-Pierre sometimes came over, and he and her mom would go upstairs together. I had a feeling something was happening, but hearing it from her was hard to take. I thought for a few moments. "Okay, thanks, Es," I said, trying to stay calm for her. "Now, sweetie, I really need to go." She hugged me tightly and didn't let go. Finally, she asked, "You promise you're coming back?" I took a deep breath and replied, "I promise." On the long flight, I had time to think about my situation with Melinda. I remembered her from St. Thomas, where she was the most popular girl and very attractive. Jean-Pierre had a strong effect on her. His influence seemed to last. When I first met Melinda, I was a steady presence in her life, reliable and there for the girls. Jean-Pierre was different. He was more ambitious and clever. He had slowly become part of her life, leaving a big mark over the years. My own troubles at work made things even more complicated. When Melinda and I started dating, my stable job was attractive to her, but as my work became more difficult, I lost that part of my appeal, and it strained our marriage. That weakness was just what Jean-Pierre needed. If it weren't for the girls, I would have stood up for myself. But I didn't want to upset their lives. I felt lost about what to do, and those thoughts filled my mind as I flew to Brazil. When I reached the Ticuna village, it was full of life. A celebration was happening, filled with music and warm greetings from my friend Mafi. The next day, we toured the hardwood plantation and talked business. Mafi told me they were getting ready for harvest and that a shipment would be ready soon. I hesitated to share my own problems, unsure how to bring it up. Later, we visited the orphanage, and I was pleased to see all the positive changes. The children were full of happiness, laughing and playing despite their tough lives. As we sat on a log watching them, Mafi looked at me closely. "Kevin," he said, "you look troubled." I tried to brush off his concern with a smile, telling him everything was okay. Still, Mafi's worried look didn't change. "Why not talk to Mafi?" he asked. "You always bring joy here. Not today." He was right. I usually felt better during my visits, but my worries were too heavy. I looked away for a moment, then back at Mafi, whose concern was clear. I knew I had to tell him what was really going on. As we walked through the rainforest, I started to explain my business problems. Mafi cared not just about the potential impact on the Ticuna, but also about how I felt. Then, for reasons I couldn't fully express, I mentioned some troubles I was having with Jean-Pierre, Melinda, and the girls. Mafi listened, asked a few questions, and then we walked in silence for a bit. "Kevin," Mafi said, "I have something for you. You must hide it." And he moved his hand through the air like a plane. Was he going to give me something to hide for my trip? "What is it, Mafi?" I asked, confused. "Bantique from Frog." He made a gesture like using a blow dart, showing me again what he had explained before. "Poison?" I said in surprise. Mafi looked me in the eye and nodded. "But what will I do with the Bantique?" I asked, using his word for the substance. We walked in silence for a while before he began to share more. In the past, when Isa from another village tried to take Ticuna women in shelter, we protected our village. He made the action again, puffing out his cheeks. "Kevin, you take and hide it for your journey." He handed me a carved wooden container. I could feel a little liquid inside, sealed tightly. "Kevin," he said seriously, "keep the Bantique away from your skin. It's dangerous." He held my arm tightly, showing he meant what he said. I paused. I wasn't sure if I wanted this gift, wondering what I was expected to do with it, but I knew refusing would be rude. I thanked him, and soon it was time to go. "Mafi," I said, "thank you for being my friend," as I hugged him. I tucked the small wooden container into my backpack. As I went through security, I realized I was carrying something I shouldn't have, even if no one noticed. When my plane from Brazil landed in Atlanta, I saw I had missed calls, including 3 from Ryan at work and 2 from my friend Alan Church. There were also calls from 2 customers in California, some numbers I didn't recognize, a message from Taylor Pilkington, and another from Melinda. Melinda's text said, "We need to talk." A few weeks ago, I might have thought this was good news, but now I felt worried. Taylor's message simply read, "Call me important." I thought this could wait for now. I decided to call Ryan first. After a moment, he answered. "Kevin," he said, sounding rushed and nervous. I braced myself for some bad news. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you. Have you talked to anyone?" he asked quickly. "Ryan, slow down. I just got here. I haven't talked to anyone yet. Take a deep breath and tell me what's going on," I replied calmly. "Okay. We've had calls all day. The cheap hardwoods Van Duzen has been selling are not good." Ryan went on to explain that the wood was getting damaged because of the changing weather, causing it to twist and bend while sitting in storage. I had thought that could happen. This was actually good news. "We've been getting calls from all over," Ryan continued. "That must be why Alan and some other people were trying to reach me." "All right," I said. "First, we need to raise prices by 10%. I'll order more wood from Brazil, start taking orders, and I'll call McLean's," I told him, feeling optimistic. "Got it," Ryan replied. My flight was about to board, but I wanted to talk to Alan first. "Hey there," Alan said. "Are you still abroad?" I told him I was back and getting ready to fly to Seattle. All right, he switched to a serious tone. I need some of your hardwood, and I need a lot of it. I decided to tease him a bit and said I had very little left, and that my next orders were almost full. Neither of those were true. Come on, Kev, he pleaded. Wasn't I there for you when you started? He had been, and I appreciated that. Alan, I'm about to board my flight. When I'm back in the office, I'll see what I can do, I said. That wasn't good enough for him. He sounded desperate and started to plead. Okay, here's what I'll do, I said. You give me a yearly order at, and I quoted a price that was 5% higher than the regular rate, and I will ensure you get the wood for the entire year. He paused for a moment. And Alan, my friend, I continued, that is my final offer. I'll send the order to Ryan, he replied. Thanks a lot. As I sat on the plane heading home, I felt like a big weight had been lifted off my shoulders with the good news about the business. Suddenly, my money worries seemed to be taken care of. All the money problems were suddenly gone, but I still had to think about my marriage and the girls. I would reach out to Melinda when I got home and see what she wanted to talk about. After I landed, I called Melinda. I got her voicemail. I tried calling a few others, but it was too late. No one was answering. I'd try again tomorrow, Friday, from the office. Then the phone rang. I thought it would be Melinda, but it was Taylor Pilkington. I almost didn't pick up. Kevin, she said, I need to talk to you. It's really important. She emphasized important. What's going on? I asked. I need to see you in person. It's really important, she insisted, sounding a bit dramatic. Taylor, I've been traveling all day and I'm tired. Can't we just... Right then, my phone buzzed. It was Melinda. Hey, Taylor, I need to call you back, I said quickly. You better, it's important, she replied before I hung up. Melinda, I said when I answered. Are you back? She asked, clearly knowing I'd been away. Yes, I'm just heading home now, I replied. She paused for a moment. It's better if you don't come home right now, she said softly. For the girl's sake, she added, knowing that would get my attention. Why? I asked, although I had a feeling I knew the answer. It's complicated, she said. We need to talk. Just not now, maybe this weekend. Please do this for the girls, she urged. I felt frustrated as I drove through the rain. Finally, I said, Fine, but we need to talk soon. Okay, I heard her say quietly. A few moments later, I realized she had hung up. I drove in a fog, heading to my office where I had spent too many late nights. I started organizing my tasks for Friday and remembered Taylor. I might as well hear her out to clear my schedule. Meet me at the Stagecoach in 20 minutes, she told me when I called her back. The Stagecoach was a bar in South Puget Sound. It was dark and cozy. We arrived at the same time. Taylor seemed nervous, which made me more curious. Okay, Taylor, I said. What's so important that we had to meet here? I looked at her. She was still quite beautiful, and I wondered why she had never married. Kevin, I really don't know how to say this, but I have to. You've been a good friend for a long time. You hired my sister, and she relies on that job, so I couldn't keep this to myself, she told me. Okay, so what is it? I asked, starting to feel impatient. This week we had a gathering with the girls, she continued. It was one of those nights when everyone was talking freely. Melinda mentioned John Pierre. She said she and John Pierre are back together. We were all surprised because of her past. She said John Pierre was the father of her children and that they were meant to be together. She mentioned she had a plan. This was her plan, Taylor continued. She was going to leave you, take your house and half of your business. She wanted her mother to come live with the girls in your house. Then she and John Pierre would move to her mom's condo by the water. They would visit the girls each week but could live their lives however they liked. I remember saying to her, "You're not serious?" She replied, "You bet I am. I'm tired of being a mother. I want to enjoy the life I deserve." Taylor looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I had many questions after hearing about this idea. What made her think her mother would agree to this? I asked. She said after her father died, the girls became the most important thing to her mother, Taylor replied. Besides, she claimed her mother always did what Melinda asked. When we asked her more about her plan, she got upset. She insisted this was the life she deserved. She said after selling your business, she and Jean-Pierre would travel without the girls. It felt like we were back in high school, Taylor continued. She acted like she was the queen and Jean-Pierre was her king, treating us like we were beneath her. Eventually, Melinda seemed to realize she may have said too much. She warned us not to tell anyone. I struggled with this all week, Taylor admitted, but I knew how great you were and how you helped Janice get her job. I had to tell you. I sat there, shocked. I knew Melinda could be selfish, but this was different. If she left her daughters with their grandmother, they would miss the care and support they needed. It seemed she didn't think about her girls at all. This was wrong, really wrong, and it would hurt the girls. I realized she was making a selfish choice. I had a lot to think about. One thing was clear. I wouldn't let this happen. Taylor shared how bad she felt about the situation. Finally, I stood up, thanked her, and she gave me a warm hug. Under different circumstances, I might have welcomed it more, but tonight I had too much on my mind. The next day, Friday, I promised myself to focus entirely on my business. I would deal with Melinda later. If anything, the requests for our products and the complaints about the Van Dusen materials had gone up. We were receiving orders that we couldn't ship for weeks. The marketplace was just glad to know they would get their materials from us eventually. In the afternoon, I received a call from Jack Valentine. He asked about work, saying he had heard there were problems with the Van Dusen lumber at McLean's and other places. We talked about lumber for a little longer. "Hey, Jack, it's really busy here. I should log off," I said. "All right," he responded, "but there's something important I need to talk with you about. Let's chat in a few weeks over lunch." I said that sounded good. Later that day, I took another look at my budget plans. I was happy to see we were going 30% over my original budget. This was great news. Then I started thinking about Melinda. As I jogged along the trail that Saturday morning, I realized I had an advantage. Thanks to Taylor, I knew about their big plan. My soft spot was for the girls. Melinda could use that against me. I went through my options again and again as I ran. Each idea had a problem that would risk either the business or the girls. Finally, I came up with a plan. It wasn't ideal, but it could work. The results would be big, but I wasn't sure how to protect the girls in the meantime. I doubted if I could make it happen, but I decided I had to try. Later, I called Melinda and asked if we could meet at my house at 6 p.m. She agreed. "And Kevin," she added, "Jean-Pierre will be here too." I acted a bit annoyed about Jean-Pierre for the sake of our plan, but really, it was just what I needed. That morning, I had a few errands to run. First, I needed to find a library with internet access that wasn't local. Then, I had to find a grocery store that sold ready-made food somewhere not too close to home. I found the library and waited half an hour for a computer. I did my research. It wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good. I looked up a few other things to hide my traces. I figured it would be hard to connect my activities at the library back to me, but I still played it safe. Next, I visited the grocery store. I bought several non-perishable items: rice, coffee, a pack of craft beer, some thin rubber gloves, and a jar of cocktail sauce. I also got a tray of cooked shrimp with a little bowl of red cocktail sauce in the middle. Then I went to my office. On Saturdays, I was the only one there. There were no security cameras. I carefully brought my grocery bags into the small kitchenette. I put on my gloves and found my travel backpack. Yes, it was still there. I planned my next move carefully. At exactly 6 p.m., I was back at my house. I didn't knock, though I thought about it. I brought a plain brown grocery bag with logos from a different store than the one I had shopped at earlier. "Kevin, welcome! Come in!" Jean-Pierre greeted me warmly. I thought, this is my house, but I kept my face neutral. "Mel," he called up the stairs. "Kevin is here. Please, sit down," he said, inviting me into the kitchen to take a seat at the table. "What do you have in the bag?" he asked, nodding toward the bag I had brought. I opened it to show a 6-pack of craft beer and a big tray of shrimp, topped with a bowl of cocktail sauce wrapped in plastic. I left a couple of other items in the bag as I placed it on the floor. "I know we need to keep things calm for our talk," I said to Jean-Pierre. "Of course, my friend," he replied, grabbing some shrimp and dipping it in the sauce. At that moment, Melinda came into the kitchen, looking a bit uneasy about our meeting tonight. "Melinda, look what Kevin has brought for us," Jean-Pierre said, pointing to the shrimp. "It's really good," he added, enjoying the food. Melinda hesitated before picking up a shrimp, dipping it in the sauce. "Thank you, Kevin," she said softly. I wanted to shift attention from the fact that I wasn't eating, so I picked up a beer. Jean-Pierre opened another. "So," I said, "now it's your turn. What are your thoughts?" Melinda then gave me a simpler version of what Taylor had told me. She didn't mention her mother moving in or selling my business. Tonight, we focused on my house. "I think it's best for the girls to stay here," Melinda said. "And as their mother, I need to be here too." Jean-Pierre continued enjoying the shrimp, nodding along, but his focus was mostly on the food. "And what do you suggest we do about our marriage?" I asked, sensing where this was going. "Kevin," she started, her expression softening, "you still matter to me. I'll always appreciate how you helped me and the girls when they were younger. You'll always be part of our lives." "But Jean-Pierre is their father, and we've reconnected. I think a quiet divorce would be best," I replied. "For the girls," she added. I sat quietly, nodding and watching what was happening around me. "Do you like the shrimp?" I asked Melinda. "Oh, yes," she said, grabbing another piece, dipping it in the sauce and savoring it. "You see, Kevin, as Melinda said, you have been important to all of us," Jean-Pierre began earnestly. "There were times when I might have made some mistakes in my youth," he said thoughtfully, shaking his head as he remembered the past. I saw Melinda enjoying another shrimp. No one seemed to notice that I hadn't eaten anything. Jean-Pierre spoke up. "Luckily, while I was having a hard time, Melinda found you." He gave me a fake smile. "You gave a home to my girls." He stretched out his arms as if to welcome everyone and looked around my house. "You, Kevin," he continued, "were my stand-in, and I appreciate that." He nodded at me. "You gave them a safe place when they needed it, and now," he said with a big smile, "it's time for me to take charge again." Any kindness I felt for him was gone. I looked at Melinda. He had a way of convincing her. She was smart, but still seemed caught up in what he was saying. The good news was that she kept eating the shrimp. "Now, Kevin, we're all adults here, and I think we can figure out the best way to move forward," he said. "We need to think about the girls and what is best for them." Suddenly, he slumped to the side and couldn't finish. Jean-Pierre fell from his chair onto the floor. He began to shake, and a pink foam came from his mouth. His eyes rolled back. "Jean-Pierre!" Melinda shouted. "Kevin, look at him! Do something!" she cried. I realized this was serious. There were important things that needed to be done quickly. I pretended to think, moving toward the bathroom to grab a towel, then stopping and going back to the kitchen for a glass of water. I acted like I was panicking while feeling strangely interested in what was happening. "Should I call for help?" I asked Melinda, continuing to stall. I turned back to her. She nodded, but her face changed. She seemed to freeze, as if the situation was affecting her. "Kevin," she whispered. "Help me," she managed to say. She was clearly in trouble, though not as badly as Jean-Pierre. He had eaten much more of the shrimp. She looked unable to move. Her speech slowed, but her eyes followed me. She was aware, but the toxins were affecting her. Her gaze watched me as I carefully put on some gloves I found in the grocery bag. I took the small bowl of leftover cocktail sauce from the table and poured it down the sink. The one with the garbage disposal I had installed years ago. I made sure to pour it all away, letting the water and disposal run longer than needed. I wanted everything to be cleaned up. Her eyes were on me, asking for help, and for a moment I felt sorry for her. But I remembered what Taylor had told me about their plans, which made me firm in my decision. Carefully, I opened a new jar of cocktail sauce and filled a new bowl with it. While wearing gloves, I accidentally got some of the new sauce on my shirt. I rinsed out the jar, took it to the basement, and filled it with random nails, screws, and washers. Then I placed it on my workbench next to other jars of similar items. After that, I went upstairs, took off the gloves, and called 911. I tried to sound urgent as I explained the emergency. 20 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. "My wife, our friend, please help," I told the paramedics, hoping my panic sounded real. By the time they left, Jean-Pierre had passed away while Melinda was alive but not doing well. Later on, the police reached out to me. The hospital's first diagnosis suggested serious shellfish poisoning. I had looked into it before and knew that certain toxins could be deadly. I also realized that some symptoms of shellfish poisoning were similar to those caused by certain poisonous frogs. The police questioned me about what happened. I told them we were talking about our kids and that Jean Pierre was a good friend who often spent time at our house. After I answered their questions, it seemed they did not suspect me of anything related to Jean Pierre's unfortunate fate and Melinda's condition. They examined the scene and even took the almost empty tray of shrimp for testing. I never asked about the results. Maybe I worried for no reason. And yes, Melinda was alive. She was completely paralyzed, but still with us. The doctor said he had never seen anything like it before. Usually, shellfish poisoning only caused mild symptoms, making this case very unusual. With real sadness, I told the girls about the tragedy that took Jean Pierre's life and impacted their mother. We all shared genuine tears. Then Esme asked the question I had been fearing. "What's going to happen to us?" she asked, worry in her eyes. "Well," I started, "you could probably stay with your grandma." I could feel their hesitation. Francine looked worried and Esme shook her head. Melinda's mom is a nice person and she could take care of them for a little while, but she couldn't provide the support the girls would need as they grew up. Even at their age, they understood this. "Or," I added, "we could all stay here together." They both nodded, agreeing with that idea. Years ago, before Melinda and I got married, we bought long-term care insurance. We made that choice because of Melinda's father's illness and the toll it took on her mother. We got a good policy and made sure to pay the premium every month. Who would have thought that things would turn out like this, where the value of the policy was finally understood? Every Sunday, the girls and I went to Ellenhurst, a care home in Bridger, about 15 miles away. We brought flowers to make her room brighter. I watched her face as the girls shared stories about school, friends, favorite shows, and their lives. I thought I saw a bit of warmth in her smile as she listened to them. But when she looked at me, it felt different. Even though she didn't move, I sensed something more in her gaze. The girls didn't seem to notice any of the tension. I talked to the doctor at Ellenhurst about her health. "It's unlikely she'll recover," he told me. If she had received help earlier, things might be better. By the time she got to the hospital, her nervous system was severely affected. Her brain and eyesight are fine. She can hear and understand, but her nervous system is weak, so she can't move or talk. "The good news is, she seems healthy in other ways and should have many years ahead," he added. "Did you hear that?" I asked her after the doctor left. "The doctor said you're doing well." I smiled, trying to cheer her up. I was surprised to see a spark in her eyes when she looked at me. Months later, finally, a vacation, I thought as the plane took off heading southwest. We had talked for months, but it had been a while since I saw her. I remembered our connection from that dance in high school. This reunion would be special. We had shared our plans, and I was excited to surprise her. I hoped she would enjoy it as much as I thought I would. Melinda's mom had kindly taken care of the girls for the week. So much had changed, yet some things felt the same. The girls and I were living in my home, and yes, they missed their mother, but they seemed to be adjusting well. Jean Pierre was hardly mentioned. Another constant was my friendship with Mafi, which was still strong. He never asked about the Bantique, and I never brought it up. I remembered my last visit to him. "Kevin," he said, giving me a friendly hug, "Mafi sees you happy now." I just nodded. Nothing more needed to be said. My work had changed, too. Over the past year, Jack Valentine and I combined our businesses. That was what Jack wanted to discuss with me months before. Jack was CEO and I was president. Together, we had 22 employees and business was doing well. Sometimes I missed the busier days when it was just the four of us, Ryan, Janice, Albert, and me. But I often appreciated the stability of our larger company. Like now, with Jack in charge, I could take a much-needed week-long vacation to Maui. She was coming from Japan, where she had been working. Our talks over the last few months had all been online. I guess that's how people connect these days. Finally, we would be together. My flight landed about an hour before hers, so I went to pick up the rental car. Seeing her and hugging her after all our messages was amazing. She looked even better in person. "Oh man, what a flight," she said, letting out a deep breath. "Our hotel check-in isn't until 4 o'clock, I replied. "Just take me to the beach, I need to feel the ocean," she said. "Sounds good," I smiled. Finally, I thought, this is going to be exciting. We parked and got changed into our beach clothes. She looked vibrant, even more so than I remembered from high school. She caught me looking at her and smiled. This way, I said, leading her across the warm sand. We climbed over some rocks and found a beautiful cove on the other side. I wondered how long it would take her to notice. We were about halfway down the shore when she saw it. "A beach like this!" she gasped, stopping and looking at me with surprise. We kept walking and found a spot to lay our towels. "Nicole," I said, "you don't have to take anything off." "Yes." It was Taylor's cousin Nicole Arnez, my date to senior prom. She looked at me, smiled, and said, "When in Rome." With a fun spirit, she went with it. "Besides, I remember how you looked at me on our first date in high school. It's about time you got to see me like this. What do you think?" she said playfully. "I should probably get you some sunscreen," I said with a grin.